Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for letting us take the 5-minute break. The next application in the public hearing tonight is Cumberland Farms Incorporated. Applicant owners are seeking variances to allow a proposal to demolish the existing retail gas station building and rebuild the structure within the front, rear, and side setbacks. Variances are required to allow the proposed building to be located up to 12 feet from the rear property line, up to 41.4 feet from the east side property line, up to 17.9 feet from the west property line, and up to 30.9 feet from the front property line. Whereas Section 4.3, Table of Dimensional Regulations of the zoning ordinance requires a 50-foot setback for all sides where abutting a residential district. This property is bounded by residential districts on all sides. In parents, residential 1 on the north, south, and west, and RSBO 1 on the east. A variance is also required because the proposed sign is internally illuminated, whereas Section 6.6.3 of the zoning ordinance requires that any sign that is located within 250 feet of a residential district boundary shall only be illuminated by a shielded external white light. No internal illumination is permitted. The property is located at 2 South Mass Street, which is map 34 lot 29 in the commercial district. And this is a continuation from not much of a dealing with the last meeting in July 5th, 2011, but we did vote on regional impact where we found that it did not have regional impact. Any comments or questions from the board before we open up to the applicant? Applicants?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Francis Bruton. I'm an attorney with Bruton and Barabee in Dover. And I represent the applicant tonight, Cumberland Farms Incorporated. With me tonight is John Marth. He is from the home office of Cumberland Farms. He's the project manager. And we just want to start by thanking you for kind of jumbling your agenda a little bit to allow us to go forward.
Okay.
We understand that you're dealing with a difficult project, and so we do appreciate that. So
They're all difficult.
Absolutely. I agree. This is a project where basically we would like to take the existing Cumberland Farms gas station, which is a convenience store that has a Dunkin' Donuts and a gas station, and completely demolish the existing structures and rebuild it in a way that's greatly enhances the aesthetic quality of the area. Just in general, I'll point out, or John will point out, that we have a depiction of the existing site, and this is a depiction from basically all of the angles that shows what exists at the site now. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's in a highly traveled area of Goffstown. It's unique in a sense that it has this canopy that's fairly close, probably about 7 feet from your property line. The lot itself does not have a lot of depth to it, unlike some of the lots that are used for commercial purposes in the area. So in any event, the plan is to come after our approvals to rebuild the project, and John has a kind of a depiction or a mock-up of what we anticipate that the project would look like. One of the most important features of this project is that we believe that it really fits in well with the structures that already exist in Goffstown, and really supports a much more enhanced aesthetic view of that area. There are other alternatives that Cumberland Farms has when it proposes sites. Some of those are kind of referred to as more urban-esque designs. We are not proposing that. We're coming in to ask basically for approval of the variances, which are more setback issues and the issue of the lighted sign. But we wanted to get an overall sense of what we anticipate the project to look like at the end of the day, just so you had a sense really what Cumberland Farms envisions for this portion of the property. One of the interesting aspects is you'll see that the building is pushed back quite a distance on the property. Right now, it's somewhat more forward on the property. The canopy is moved back off of the property line as well. And the signage becomes usable, but certainly more pleasing to the eyesight. And one of our requests tonight will be asking to internally illuminate the sign. The current sign is totally illuminated. What we're asking for at the end of the day is that we only illuminate the logo on the sign plus the prices for the gas. So we would not be looking to illuminate the entirety of the sign.
Can you
And we have-
clarify the current sign's illumination? It's illuminated from an external light, is that
No,
correct?
it isn't. It's internally
Internally
illuminated.
illuminated.
Yeah. So we're really basically taking a kind of a non-conforming sign and making it more conforming, if you will, by reducing the amount of area that would be illuminated internally. We did provide photos of what the sign basically looks like today and what we envision it would look like if we were to get the variance.
That's right.
Mr. Chair, if I can just
Yeah.
clarify too, the reason a variance would be needed in that case, since it does have an existing illuminated sign, is because they would be removing the entirety of the existing sign and replacing it with a new sign. And any new signage like that is fully replacing, you know, an older sign that's been taken down has to meet all the new codes and
It's always trying to become
requirements.
more conforming, right? That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Okay.
So we're happy to suggest that we are satisfying that criteria at least in terms of doing that. And we hope you'll agree when you know, as you look at the pictures that we have. Any further questions of
Nope.
Mr. Rose? Okay. So in any event, the station, again, I indicated we would be removing the existing convenience store. One of the aspects that hopefully was a positive from the town's perspective is we actually be removing the Dunkin' Donuts franchise. The convenience store will provide coffee, but will not have a Dunkin' Donuts in it. The dispensers will be reduced from the existing 4 down to 3 as depicted on the plan. And as a result of moving the building back toward the rear of the property, we'll be picking up, I mentioned in my application, 6 to 8 spaces. Because we have moved forward with some specific designs, we know that we'll pick up 8 spaces, 8 new additional parking spaces, which is certainly, I think, a benefit in terms of on-site traffic flow and things of that nature. The intent as well, and you saw the pictures in terms of what we anticipate, is just to maintain a nice colonial design. There would be some brick veneer work on the building as well. John, if you can just put that up again. I mention that because in addition, we've had opportunity to sit down with the planner. We've actually had an opportunity to sit down with the planning board as well on a conceptual basis. And we did have a meeting with the abutters to hear their concerns as well. And out of that, what we understood was that we might want to put some buffering in the front of the property. That too would have that decorative veneer on it. So it would be pleasing to the eye in terms of that aspect. The one thing that came up when we met with Mr. Rose and that we discussed with the planning board was that there are currently 3 points of egress and ingress to the property. And if we look on the plan, you can see that the proposal would be to maintain the 3 points of egress, but the point that is, let's say, in the middle of the far 2 points, which is closest to the intersection of South Mass Road and Mountain Road, would be angled in a way that would only promote turning into the property from the one direction, that direction being where the cars are traveling on that side of the road, as opposed to what they could do now, which is actually cross a lane of traffic oncoming and turning left into the facility at that point. So we're proposing to eliminate the ability to make that turn by angling the parking. And in addition, we're proposing that we eliminate the means of egress from that point. So the changes are, we hope, good. We know that they seem to be favorably received by the planning board, and we hope the abutters as well. So the crux of our requests relate mostly to side and rear yard setbacks. The chairman read each specific request. Because we're in an area, although it's commercially zoned, that's near a residential area, we have to meet 50-foot setback requirements. We did identify on the plan that you had, and we did create a kind of a pink box on the plan to show you, if you applied those 50-foot setbacks, what we would be left with on the site to build, which obviously is a fairly small area.
Is that shown on the plan?
It is, and
Where
it's
is
that
pink here?
pink box, I
Okay.
guess. I'll call it pink. I don't know.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah.
And that is on your plan. It's maybe not as easy to see, and that's why we highlighted it there. And we also highlighted the property line as well in yellow, just for your convenience.
Could you highlight the existing structure?
Sure.
Could you highlight it for me?
Actually highlight,
Yeah.
well, I don't point it out to you.
No,
here.
I'd like you to highlight it on the diagram, please.
How about green?
How about green?
Thanks.
Or yellow again, that's the case maybe, but this is the existing building with the existing canopy.
Okay.
It's not very green.
That one didn't
No,
work
it
very
wouldn't.
well.
So
The yellowish
Orange.
green I've ever seen.
So it looks, with that drawing, it looks like the setbacks that you were encroaching upon before were the front and the back, not necessarily the sides in that case. Or it was pretty close, at least on one side, but.
Right. That's correct. And the general intent is to, again, move the building back to create a better flow of traffic. Right now, with the pumps turned in the direction that they are, there are areas in the front of the property where, if cars are lined up, that the flow of traffic is restricted in that area because no one could get through, basically, in that area. Turning the pumps the other way toward the store helps in that regard, in terms of creating an aisle or a lane of traffic flow that's possible there. And again, we add more parking spaces. You may be familiar with the site, the existing spaces. There are some existing spaces on the mountainside road of the building that, basically there would only be the spaces that are shown now as opposed to those. They're a little hard to maneuver right now, but we open up the site in a sense by moving, excuse me, by moving the building back and by moving the canopy and the dispensers back as shown.
I live on Mountain Road, and I have seen this parcel develop since I've been here in 1978.
Right.
Started out as a garage, then it became a little convenience store with a garage with the Tetros, and then it became, I guess Cumberland Farms came on board, then we have Dunkin' Donuts that have come on board, and I have to say that it is a very congested corner. My concern, it looks to me, if I'm not mistaken, the existing building was within the 50-foot setbacks?
That's right.
And you are asking us to consider expanding a conforming setback building to a non-conforming state?
No, it's, the building is non-conforming because it's in that 50-foot setback.
It's not fully contained. It bumps into the 50-foot setback area, but it also pops out almost to the point where the new proposed building is shown.
I would also add just quickly that while we are making, I understand your point, technically we're making a less non-conforming with the building. However, the canopy, we are making more conforming to setback requirements. So there is, it's a reconfiguration of what's happening on the site. So I mean, I just want to be clear that we're not completely just trying to disregard setback requirements.
So on the,
Could I just add to that as well, that
Sure.
there are communities where if you make it less non-conforming, you don't need the variance, even if you continue to encroach when you rebuild. But we are here for a variance, so that's the relief we are requesting, is the variance to the setback. We're not
Correct.
trying to prove that we are actually taking a non-conforming use and making it more conforming. In fact, the need for the variance is because, for instance, in the rear setback, we're going closer to the rear. The theory there is that there is some activity that might go on in the back, and by moving the building back, it actually may be a benefit to the abutters in the rear, who, when we had our neighborhood meeting, suggested they might favor a building that's closer to their property because there wouldn't be that area in the back. But again, just to be clear, we are asking for a variance. If we were making it more conforming, we might not be asking for the variance.
I consider it an expansion of a business that is existing there now.
Yeah,
I
and
really
that's
do.
why we need the variance.
Right. And I consider it an expansion into nonconformity on the side setbacks. The east side and the west side do
But
not
that's
conform.
the very definition of every variance
Right.
that anyone
Right.
asks of you.
Right, I understand that, but according to our zoning regulations, the spirit of our zoning ordinance is that we do not go further into nonconformity, that we maintain conformity.
Right.
And I understand that that's, variances go
That's
from
exactly
there.
why you have the variance. But there are other
Right.
spirits, if you will, or purposes of your ordinance that I'll talk about in my presentation that we think do not conflict, that we comply with and that we're in compliance with. But every variance by its nature will always affect negatively, in a sense, that very spirit that you're referring to, which is we're asking to become non-conforming, and that's the nature of every single variance before you. And if that was the criteria in terms of opposing the grant of the variance, then you would have to oppose every variance, in a sense.
We've done it before. Traditionally, we see it in the non-conforming setbacks in the Pinardville area, where all the properties are too close to the property line. They're not big enough. So when anybody does any building or building up or building sideways, it becomes more non-conforming when we
Right.
allow those activities. So it's not unheard of that we hear applications that become more non-conforming.
And ultimately,
What-
at the end of the day, again, we're trying to create this aesthetic upgrade that would be a benefit to the town as well as to the applicant. Would you like me to go through the criteria first, and then
Please go ahead.
we can do that? Okay, contrary to the grant of the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. We suggest that the granting of the variance represents a reasonable use of the property, particularly in light of the existing use of the property. The granting of the variance will basically move the building, which currently is 77 feet from the property line, back to 105 feet. Moving the building further to the rear will create additional parking spaces and create what we believe to be a better flow of traffic on the site. The canopy, again, would become more conforming to your regulations, would not be a kind of butted up to the property line that it currently is. With respect, that's with respect to the setbacks. With respect to the illuminated sign, basically the exhibits that I provided to you in our application suggest that there is quite a bit of light coming from the existing sign. It's permitted to maintain that, but what we'd like to do is create a design that obviously is less light coming from it. Your zoning ordinance would permit us to have a exterior light shining upon the sign. And again, we believe that that would create what is kind of referred to as a splash effect. And we'd like to avoid that, particularly in this situation, which involves being in a heavily traveled intersection. So we respectfully submit that the sign that we are proposing and the method of illumination would tone down, if you will, what exists now and would be more, basically more conforming to your ordinance by having only very small portions of the sign being internally illuminated. The sign can be illuminated, it's just a question of can it be internally illuminated. But given the fact that it's on this intersection, we believe that it's appropriate and would not be contrary to the public interest. The test basically comes down to whether or not the design that we're providing alters the essential character of the locality. Obviously, given the fact that this use basically exists now, we suggest that along with the aesthetic aspect of what would result, that we're not altering the essential character of the locality, and as such that we're the granting of the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. The second prong of the variance test relates to whether or not the spirit of the ordinance is observed. And we pointed out some of the purposes of your zoning ordinance, which were to promote public safety, convenience, comfort, aesthetics of the inhabitants of the town. Others are to facilitate adequate provisions for transportation and basically for private facilities and services, and also to encourage appropriate and coordinated uses of the land to allow for planned orderly development. We believe that we satisfy those requirements. Clearly, the proposed use that we would like to have on the property would be suitable for the property and reasonable in light of the existing conditions. The granting of the variance would increase the private services and would allow for orderly development. Obviously, as you well know, we have to go in front of your planning board for total site plan review. In fact, we've applied for that at this point. And the planning board will go through all of the aspects that they have to with respect to their process as well. Again, the test here is whether or not the granting of the variance would unduly and in a marked degree conflict with the ordinance, such that it violates the basic zoning objectives of the ordinance. And we believe that it does not in light of all the factors that I outlined. Your third prong of your test is whether the granting of the variance would do substantial justice. Again, the parcel is proposed to be used as it currently is used. We would become more conforming with respect to the sign as well as the canopy. The number of pumps would go again from 4 down to 3. This test, as you may be aware, weighs the benefit to the applicant versus the burden to the abutters. We don't believe there would be a burden. This site will be designed with the participation of the abutters. We have quite a bit of buffering. By moving the building back, you actually create buffering with respect to the building, to the property owners in the rear. You eliminate the use of that area as maybe a place to gather or loiter. And as such, we believe that the benefit to the applicant in terms of being able to increase the aesthetic value of the property far outweighs any burden, which we believe there is none, to the abutters. The granting, the fourth prong is whether or not the values of the surrounding properties would be diminished. We believe that the existing values of the surrounding properties are premised upon the existing use, and we're not changing this use in any significant way. It's basically the same use, but more of an aesthetic upgrade with things becoming more conforming. We don't believe that there's any negative aspect to the project with respect to the abutters. Your fifth criteria relates to unnecessary hardship. And we believe that the property is obviously unique in terms of its size, particularly with respect to the depth or lack thereof. It's also unique in terms of its location. It's at the intersection of a busy intersection. Again, we look at whether or not the first prong of your hardship test is there a relationship between the general public purposes of your ordinance and the specific application of those provisions to the property. I referenced some of the general public purposes of your ordinance, which are to promote appropriate land uses, to promote and preserve health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants, and to preserve and increase private services throughout the town of Goffstown. We submit that the issues that we're asking for you to grant a variance relate to, again, the rear yard setback and the side yard setbacks. The existing building is, in fact, quite close to the side yard setback already. And basically, we believe that you are not frustrating those general purposes that I outlined by granting these variances. In fact, by granting these variances, we'll be able to proceed with the project and, in fact, make things more conforming for, again, the canopy and the sign and actually the amount of parking that's required. Under your ordinance, there's a certain number of parking spaces that would be required if this was a brand-new development. We will not meet that, but we will come closer to meeting that. I think we're going to get up to 23 spaces, and your ordinance requires 25. There's currently 18, 26, excuse me. So we will be becoming more conforming with respect to the parking as well under your ordinance. So
What drives the number of parking spots requirement? Is it building size, lot
Yes.
size?
Yes.
Building size?
Type of use and building size.
Right.
Okay.
with respect to the illumination of the sign, again, we suggest that, and you can look at the pictures, far better off with the type of signage that we would propose. And by granting the variance to allow that form of illumination would certainly promote the health, the safety, and general welfare of the inhabitants by having less glare. And by requiring an outside light that would create some splash in that intersection, we don't think that's in the best interests as well. So we're asking for that variance as well. The second criteria is whether or not the proposed use is reasonable. Kind of already addressed that, obviously, in the other criteria, but again, keep in mind this is an existing use, and as such, we believe this is entirely reasonable to basically allow the same use, but one that will become more conforming in various ways, the parking, the signage, and the canopy issue. As a kind of a catch-all, if I wasn't able to satisfy the unnecessary hardship, the new law provides a kind of a Part B, if you will, to the unnecessary hardship, and it's in the last part of my narrative, and it basically is premised upon if you can't meet the criteria that I believe we do meet, owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance. Generally, if you have a parcel where when you apply all of the restrictions, you come to a very, very small area, we think that's what that part of the test is really getting at. We highlighted what we would have if we complied with those restrictions. And as you can see, it would be very, very tiny. And given the fact that the use already exists, we believe it would be unreasonable to have to comply with those restrictions. So under Part B, we believe we meet that test, even though we also believe we meet the test under Part A, if you will, of unnecessary hardship. So I'm trying to keep it brief because of your own issue, time constraints. But if you have any questions, John or I are willing to obviously go through all of them.
If I could just, before open it to the board, if there's any questions related to why we are the design we are from a company standpoint and how we got to this, be more than happy to answer those. If there's reasons you feel it should be one way and not another, I'd be more than happy to sort of entertain those questions as well.
Well, I guess the two quick questions I have that relate to it, and it speaks to the criteria number 5 regarding the hardship. I guess when you spoke to 5, Part B, it speaks to, is there any, if this is the relief valve, if there's no other reasonable use of
Right.
the property, isn't another way to use it is you don't make any change? I mean, you stay the way it is. So I guess it would be, you either build it within the setbacks or you leave it the way it is and nobody's gonna bother you, right? So is there a company's made a decision that you wanted to change it or need to change it, or is it a need or versus a want?
It's, well, obviously from Cumberland Farms standpoint, it's a need. I mean, we, our business model has changed. We are aggressively remodeling and rebuilding throughout the New England region currently. And the primary reason for knocking down and rebuilding, particularly in a location like this, is the existing footprint and building as configured doesn't support our business model today as far as what we offer in our stores for convenience items, coffee, the storage requirements that we have for the items that we offer. So that's why a site like this becomes really necessary to look at doing a knockdown and rebuild as part of our business model.
And I'll add as well, I mean, the building was constructed around 1970. You're looking at a building that's over 40 years old. It's tough inside for the employees. It's very, very cramped. And buildings have a life cycle. And
it still has the remnants of the old service bays on the side of. I mean, the building. It is quite aged as well. So.
Couldn't you not tear down what's there and replace what's there? I mean, there's nothing that prevents you from tearing down and replacing within the same footprint that you have.
well, what we'd like to do is, again, make the project more conforming rather than maintain the existing non-conformities. And one of the things we'd like to do is add the parking to try and get up to what your ordinance requires. And that requires moving the building back, which relates to the backyard setback. We'd like to increase the aesthetic value. It's going to be a benefit to the town, for sure.
What is the amount of square footage of the existing building? Does anyone know that?
It's around
1,900?
1,900 square feet.
And this one is how many?
I believe it'll be around 3,000, maybe 3,200.
So you're almost doubling it.
Mm,
Well,
Well, the 38, yeah.
3,800
It's-
is there, so.
We're doubling it, but we're moving it back. We did talk to the abutters who were behind the building. They preferred that we move it back. They're here tonight, and if I misspoke, I'm more than happy to be corrected. There were some issues with respect to our maintenance of that parcel, which they brought to our attention tonight, which was helpful to us because we did actually already contact the company to get that fixed. But the abutters suggested that that would be a better location for the building from their perspective, because again, it would provide kind of more of a buffering effect of the site.
right now, parking exists down both, well, there's a
Right.
paved area to the top of the slope here and a paved area to the top of the slope here. Currently, as we all saw in the winter we just had, snow, trash, debris, everything is pushed this way, as evidenced by the abutters' photos tonight. There's damage to some of their landscaping, there's trash, debris, etc. So in some ways, by the very reconfiguration of the site, you're taking away that ability for plows to be pushing back in this area. So I think that's sort of what FX was talking about, and again, the abutters are here tonight, I'm sure they'll speak to clarify if we've misspoken. I wanna, if I can take a moment, just speak to, I think, some of the other improvements for consideration due to, public safety and betterment in general of the corner. Having spent a little bit of time on this site and seen some of the traffic that occurs, driving by the site on any given day, we have also done some traffic study work on for the site. The vast majority of our traffic comes from the downtown area. I believe it's somewhere around 65% of the traffic generated is from this direction. So I think that the improvements that we're proposing, as well with the improvement of the curb cuts, the one-way in, are very important as well to this intersection. I think that the reason that we use this template for our sites is, as today, as many of you, if you've been on the site, with the gas islands parallel to the building, when you have traffic in here and queued up, and if someone parks in front of the building, this portion of the property and this portion of the property are essentially severed from a traffic flow perspective. When you introduce a situation with gas islands here, particularly when you're going to have the majority of your traffic using the one-way ingress rather, to the property, vehicles are going to be pulling in to the property, fueling separately from the flow of a lot of the rest of the convenience store use. So in many ways, it improves the cycle, the flow of traffic on the site as well. So I want to be clear that we didn't sort of arbitrarily decide that this is why the building looks good here. There was a sort of method to the madness, and if the site was larger, obviously, we would probably not be running into these issues, but this is why we're here.
Ergo, the variances for the setbacks, right? That's what I
Correct.
hear. The other second question I had on the variance criteria is regarding the internal illumination of the sign. Do you know what the reason is why we do not allow internal illumination of signs in this area?
My understanding is that it's to lessen the effect of the glare from the sign. And we believe that the sign in this case would obviously reduce the glare, and we've submitted the photos to show you what we think the change would look like, and it would significantly increase that issue or address that issue.
It's not keeping it a small town feel, historic area addressed to downtown. Is there any other, do you know, Brian, the specific reasons for this?
I don't know the thought behind the regulation. I know I've read it several times, but typically in an ordinance, reasons for doing a standard are not
They're not always there.
usually specified. And it's not necessarily important to specify why you do it. But the fact remains that the standard is there, and it's up to the board to determine whether or not it's appropriate.
Yeah, it gets into that first question, is no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision.
and
So
if
you
I-
start looking at what drove
Right,
this
and
requirement.
that's why I addressed it the way I did, because I think one of your purposes of your ordinance is health, welfare, and safety of the inhabitants. And if you have a sign that's neon flashing, the worst-case scenario, let's say, that could obviously affect the safety of some drivers in this congested area, or the neighbors. What we're trying to do is become more conforming and tone it down with the depiction that you have. One of the things that we would do would be, with respect to the prices that would be illuminated, your ordinance requires a conditional use permit if they are changed electronically. We would be applying for that conditional use permit from the planning board, which is where you do that. But we would do it meeting the criteria that they could only be changed once a day, but the fact that it's being done electronically means that we need a conditional use permit.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that's again, something
And
that they would address.
speaking about the sign, since you brought up the sign issue, as far as I'm concerned, I think it would be hypocritical of me to approve your sign, because if you look across the street from where you are, there is an antique business there. I believe the Leclercs own it. And they came in here within the past year, I think it is, to put a sign up on their business. And we were, as a board, very, very, very firm that that sign not be an illuminated sign, that it was a sign that had a light that shone underneath, so you couldn't even see it, that would go up, and it had to be off at specific times.
Mhm.
And that's your neighbor, that's across the street from you.
Yep.
And you do have a very, very nice-looking sign down at your other Cumberland Farms, which I do feel falls within the criteria of the ordinance in this town. And I'm just saying, from that aspect, I find it would be hypocritical in the same neighborhood to allow an illuminated sign on one side of the street, when as a board member, we certainly would not allow it across the street.
There's a couple of distinctions. One of them is that this sign exists now. And as a matter
Absolutely.
of right, we could basically,
Replace the sign faces.
we could replace the sign faces, keeping the existing sign. We're really trying to make this a better site than the existing site. We could do that as a matter of right, and if we didn't get the variance, unfortunately, that may be in the effect. The other is that we're in the commercial zone, and it's not the historic district. And I believe across the street is residential.
And that house across the street is on the historical register.
Well,
One of the
nonetheless,
houses
we're
across
not
the
in the
street.
historic district, so you should keep that in mind. And we are in a commercial zone as
Right.
well. So the big difference, however, is again, this is a non-conforming sign that is internally illuminated, and we're looking to reduce that significantly. And I think that's a very large, benefit, and not an insignificant issue when considering it. And it completely distinguishes it from a property that doesn't have anything. And that is a bright line distinction. I hate to use that term.
Can you give us the measurements of the square footage of the existing versus the proposed?
I can not off the top of my head at this moment, but the sign that is there today, the sign that we're proposing, I should say, is, and again, without knowing all the exact bylaws that are dictating our square footage, our typical sign that we are proposing here is a 3.5 by 6, which is that Cumberland Farms. On the new sign that you see the photo, this upper piece with just the logo lit is usually a 3.5 by 6. And then below that is the mechanically controlled scroller price sign, which is usually 4x6. That's what we would be in the neighborhood of, which I will tell you, I don't know the exact square footage of what's out there today, but you've got the Dunkin' sign, the Gulf sign, the 3 Price sign. It's, I feel confident saying what's out there is a significantly larger square footage than what we would be proposing.
Can you put the board up, and can you tell me that's the
Sure.
sign you're putting up?
That
Well,
sign
is that
doesn't
a-
look like the photo.
Well, I will tell you that, and the planner had mentioned to us, this is sort of an out-of-the-box sign. We will probably be articulating this further. I think Brian and I had discussed at some point making this more conforming with the neighborhood.
Village
But as
scale
far as the
design.
actual signage portion itself, yes, and no, that will not be the price of our gas. But yes, the signage portion itself, that is what we would be looking to do.
So you don't think it's bigger than that, then? This is size-wise?
This is smaller than what's there today.
But that's, what you're proposing to build is approximately this size?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you show us the existing photo?
Oh, actually, I do have the existing.
Okay.
That's the existing sign today. So you've got the Gulf logo, Gulf Express, 3 Price, and then the Dunkin'.
What was the sign that came, there was a picture of a sign that came in our package?
It's in the variance package.
Yeah, that was Exhibit C. That was a sample of an illuminated sign.
Correct. I didn't have a photo of this sign specifically lit at night, so I had to make do with what I
Okay,
had.
so are we talking about these signs that we have in our packages? Is this what you're proposing to put
This-
there?
This portion here, the Cumberland logo, and then it will not be this, obviously the diesel, we're not offering diesel at the site, so that goes away. But this Price portion and this Cumberland portion.
And how tall would it be?
Again, I think it's gonna be a function of how we work out with the planner. It may become sort of a shorter monument-type sign. I'm not sure, it could be 10 feet, maybe, somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm not exactly sure yet, till we get to that point.
And
It will certainly be a lot lower than this. That much is for sure. This sign is probably 20 feet tall, I'm guessing.
One sign that is Exhibit D in our packet that has the external illuminated Cumberland Farms on the splash on the building, is
That's
that
right.
being proposed as it is there? Or
yes,
is it, okay,
On the building, it would be a different light fixture, but it would be something of that.
externally
Correct.
splashed? Okay. Which is conforming, I guess?
yes.
Correct.
All right, anyone
Can I
else?
see the other sign you had on the,
This
right
one?
here, yeah. Are you gonna have that sign there too?
Which sign?
Is it, that Cumberland, yeah,
This?
yeah, no, the one that says $9.99.
That's the price sign, correct.
Right.
We won't be telling it, like I said, we won't be $9.99, but yes, that's the.
So you're
as
gonna
we-
have that
No,
sign
what you're saying,
there.
in addition
In
to
addition to
the internally lit sign.
No,
No,
this is
no,
a
that-
replacement.
That's what,
that
yeah,
is-
that's
that is the
what she's
internal
asking.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is a nighttime representation of what this will look like. Again, I don't have an exact nighttime shot of.
But the only request with respect to the sign is that sign that is on the corner, all we're asking is that you allow us to internally illuminate that sign. Your zoning ordinance would require that we have a light on the outside shining onto
Splashing
the
up.
sign.
Like the one downtown, like the other one that's downtown.
Right.
In the
but
historic.
And that would,
I want to stress just.
well, the thing that I mean, it's not so simple to say like, actually, like the village stops here. This is a village, and I understand that there's a village district, and I understand this is commercial. This is a very, very unique commercial spot. It's surrounded by residential. It's almost a continuation of the village. I think you'll notice that the village probably goes out past the villa and the conceptual, the concept of this town and this village extends further than the village district. And I think in my main concern is that this is going beyond what I consider to be village. I don't have a real issue with some reconstruction here, but I look at the size of this building that is twice the size of what we have now, and I look at the fact that the building is twice the size, and I really would say to you, does it really make a difference whether you have 9 feet on the side next to this of residential abutter? Instead of it being 41.7 or 9 feet, I mean, could you make the build, I know you could make the building smaller.
Well, you might say that.
Yeah.
But there's a significant amount of investment that the Cumberland Farms will make here.
Correct.
And this is a store that fits with their model in terms of deciding whether or not to upgrade a facility. And the ultimate end result is that I think everyone would agree the aesthetic quality of this site versus what exists now is far superior. So there is a need for that square footage. In order for the applicant to make it work too, the applicant has to make it work as well. And it's not offensive, in my opinion, to have that portion of the building serve as a barrier between the other parcel, which would be blocked. Cars pulling into that area will not be shining their lights on abutters' properties. There's no negative aspect to that 9 feet. I understand you're saying it's a doubling, and that's essentially what you're saying. But that, to me, doesn't relate to the criteria of the variance.
Well,
and-
I think that it is a hardship
And
for
let
the
me
neighbor.
just finish that,
Oh, excuse me.
I understand your understanding of the village is that it may go beyond the village district, but your planning board spent time considering what the village district would be, and your master plan presumably is devoted to that as well, to come up with what the village district is. So while I recognize that, and I started my presentation suggesting we want to come in with a design that fits Goffstown, and mimics a lot of what the village district has. We haven't gone beyond that concept. We have promoted a design that really fits in with the character of Goffstown. The applicant has other designs that it considers which are not appropriate for Goffstown, and we did not bring those to the table. But we did sit down with the abutters. We did sit down with the planning board as well, who seemed enthusiastic about the upgrade that we can bring to the site. So there's a balance here. The balance for the applicant has to also be considered in terms of what they need to do in order to produce a result that hopefully is far superior than what exists today. So I understand your concept in terms of it's a doubling, even though we know it's not actually a doubling, but it's an appropriate building for this site at the end of the day, and it works, and it creates more conformity, particularly with the parking, which is required in your zoning ordinance. And so those aspects, particularly also with the alteration of the pumps and the movement of the canopy off the site, is a great benefit, not only to the town, but to the applicant as well, and hopefully to the abutters. So we really would like you to consider that and not just say it's a doubling, but look at it in the overall context of what we're offering.
Does Cumberland Farms have another template that's smaller than this?
That is the smallest template that we are doing today. And I think it's important to note that yes, the building is increasing in size. No, it is not doubling. But it is also important to note that we are reducing the gas use as part of this offset. Yes, we are making a larger building, but we are decreasing by 25% the amount of pumps that are on the site as well. So I just want to make sure that that's also taken into consideration.
It's not directly one of the criteria, but in your studies of old to new, did you envision there's more users at the site, fewer users because there's no Dunkin' Donuts or gas pumps?
I think, and again, just based on my experience, as someone who's done permitting and approvals for several Cumberland Farms and several Cumberland Farms that had previous Dunkin' Donuts in them, Dunkin' Donuts is a really big driver of business. We would kill to have the driver of business that Dunkin' Donuts does for coffee and donuts. I mean, yes, will we have coffee? Will we have? Yes, but in my opinion and in my experience, we do not drive the kind of coffee business that a Dunkin' Donuts does. We would love to.
This is a compliment too to people getting gas as opposed to
Right.
just coming for one point of service, which would be the Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay. Any other questions?
No. They've been answered.
Vivian or Joe?
I was just wondering why you're eliminating the Dunkin' Donuts.
Again, back to our, Cumberland Farms at one time had a business model which included what we call quick serve restaurants, Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, things of that nature. Because Cumberland Farms, we have really tried hard to develop our own coffee branding, farmhouse blend, our own packaging of items. It's somewhat counterproductive to our business model to have a direct competitor in our stores. So Dunkin' Donuts is typically not something that we look to put in our stores today.
Lynn?
I guess the phrase Kevin's question maybe a little bit more specifically in terms of what you would anticipate daily traffic counts with the existing facility versus what you're looking at with
We-
this upgrade, what kind of numbers are we
We have
talking?
done a traffic study which will be presented as part of the package for the site plan review under planning board. I don't have all the specifics. As I said before, I do know some of the generalities about, like I said, the traffic. From what I've seen, 65% of the traffic generated past this site is from the downtown, 25 is from the Manchester direction, and I think it was like 6%, some small number from Mountain Road. We have all the turning I mean, it's all been done. I don't have the specifics on it this evening.
Well,
but
the phrase, perhaps I phrased it right, in terms of customer counts, in
Mhm.
terms of daily business, you're hoping for a big increase in business
well,
with
yes.
better access to the
Yes.
site?
Of course. I mean, I would be lying to say that we're looking to build a new
Expensive
facility
neighbors.
to have less business. So, yes, I mean, we are looking to drive business to the site. We look to make it a destination for people here in town, to go to for convenience items. That is a true statement.
And the one other thing, this would, I believe there are some restrictions on the hours of operation on this site.
This
This
site-
would maintain the
would-
same hours of operation?
We would maintain, I believe we are 10 o'clock is the closing time for this property. I have already informed, as a result of the meeting we did have with the butters, as well as, I believe last year, our operations people tried to get an increase by 1 hour, and I believe the abutters were opposed to that, and also reiterated at the meeting that we held earlier this year. So at this time, we are not, and I've informed operations, the people that would typically look for those things, that we are not looking to increase hours with the new facility at this time. So it'll still stay at 10 o'clock.
Can you tell me if the existing building has adequate parking for the size?
It does not.
How many
It's-
parking spaces does it need?
Inadequate. It's got, you say it's got 1,800 square feet,
Yeah.
correct?
And it's
You
19.
can do
It's about 1,900.
1,900?
And then how many parking spots are there right now?
So, There's about 13 or something.
Yeah, are we counting because on this, we're
There are
counting the
15
dispenser
spaces.
islands as
Oh.
parking spaces. I
Yes,
don't
the
know.
islands are considered part of the parking of the
That's how
existing one.
that's
Yeah.
how we are
There's
counting.
there's 8 at the pumps, right? And there's another
And a few down the
7
side.
or 8.
9, 10,
Yeah, in our
11,
application, we indicated there's 15 spaces.
And I believe
Our
Okay.
site plan
and I
application.
believe your bylaw requires 26 was the calculation that we came up with.
For that size of a building.
I'm talking,
right?
I'm
Oh, no,
talking,
for the new
For the new
proposal,
site.
it would
Yeah, I wanna
The
know.
require
old size of building, it's less.
be half of it.
I think it's per 150 square feet of
One
gross
per
floor area,
150.
I believe was the requirement.
Just double check that.
So that's gonna be somewhere in the 13, 14 range.
I have a calculator for that.
Sale of goods and merchandise, general.
You said about one for every 150?
I
That
believe
says
that,
1 per 200. Retail sale of gasoline,
I believe it was 1 per 150.
1 for every 200.
Oh, I lied, I apologize.
9.5.
Yeah,
9.5 parking spaces?
you have 8 at the pumps.
Oh, but
There's
there's
was-
office space as well.
There was we went through this
I do
in
remem-
some
I do
length
recall
over how
going
we got to
through
the
it.
parking calculation.
Yeah, there was more than just that.
Is the retail too, right?
So it's more complicated and there's probably requires more spots than there. So essentially, the statement is it requires more spots than you currently have.
Correct, and even under the new proposal, we still can't physically meet the requirements under the new proposal.
So how much are we on?
Sounds like by one or two or something. Three?
Three.
By 3
And
parking
that's-
spaces we're
And
on?
They
that's.
will be under the new building.
And by the way, we have to get a conditional use permit for that.
From the planning board.
planning
How
board.
many
That's
are you
one of
off
the things.
presently?
Excuse me?
How many spaces are we off right now?
Well, again,
I don't know if I have-
I don't know if we have that calculation.
Any other
Is it on
questions? Because we can hear from the butters and stuff, and maybe they can
Yeah.
think about that and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you have any other
Existing
questions?
No,
parking
I just like that
spaces.
answered.
Okay.
That's all.
Attorney Bruton, I think we have all the questions we have of you right now.
Thank you.
1,500 square feet.
Mark?
think the,
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
Leave this here for now.
How does
Yeah, you
that
can leave
work?
it there. Is there any abutters that would like to speak tonight again on this application? Are there for or against?
Judy looks
Yes.
like Judy. The one who was a question on the board.
Good evening. Good to see you again.
Good to see everybody. How are you?
Please introduce yourself for the audience.
I'm
and-
Judy Leclerc. My husband and I live at 5 South Bass Street, right across the street from the Cumberland Farms. Listening to all this tonight was very, very enlightening because Dick and I did not make it to the meeting. We were on vacation, so we were able to get some information tonight. Back on March 14th, the Cumberland Farms sent us a letter. As your neighbors, we not only welcome your support, but are interested in addressing any questions or concerns you might have with regard to what they're trying to do. And because Dick and I were going on vacation, when I came back, I called Mr. Marth twice and didn't get any response, so I'll sort of get my comments tonight to you guys. This is a proposal of the building that they sent us in color. I think this sort of gives you a better idea of what the building will look like. This will be right across the street from South Mast and our neighbors. To me, it's way too big for our little community. We're really, as they addressed, we're next door to the historic district on one side on Mountain Road. Then we're in for the older houses on our side of the road, we're not in the historic district per se, but we're older homes, and we treasure them. And I think having a building like this right across the street is just, it's too much, it's overkill, it really is. So a couple, I wrote some notes out here, and so just bear with me if you would. First of all, I am a Cumberland Farms customer. I go in there. I like them. I've always liked them, and I like their coffee. So this has nothing to do personally with them. I think most people would like to know that they have the quiet enjoyment of their house to live in. And being associated and right across the street from Cumberland's and Dunkin' Donuts now, you have to really live what goes on there. I mean, you physically have to be there to see everything that goes on. The traffic that goes through there is really one issue of concern for me. So let me just go through a couple little thoughts here. We are located across the street from Cumberland Farms, and we're directly exposed to them because we're right in front of them, where our neighbors are maybe a little bit off to the side. Setbacks are 50 feet is required under the current zoning ordinance for a reason. It's to allow individuals to enjoy their own homes without the intrusion of neighbors or neighborhood businesses. It appears that Cumberland Farms is striving to be like the Shell station and the Irving station down the road. And I think maybe, part of that from the size they're trying to envision. Truly, when I came home tonight, I looked at the Shell station, and truly I think the vision of that station size is truly what this is representing. And the Shell station down the road does not have abutters as far as regular neighbors. There's nobody across the street. So they're in a very different locale, and they don't have the neighbors to worry about. With the new proposed building layout, I believe this will indeed present additional problems with traffic flow. Because the store is doubling in its size, delivery trucks, which are normally 18-wheelers, because I see them for both product and for gas, are going to continue having issues getting into the lot. And I think tonight when he mentioned, and I didn't realize this ingress going into the station here, if you take a look at a 18-wheeler coming through trying to deliver stuff, and they get into the parking lot, I'm not sure how they're gonna maneuver doing their gas deliveries and their deliveries for their food when they can't come back out this way. They can't turn onto Mountain Road easily because Mountain Road's too small. So they have to come out the other side over here, and I just don't think that's a good traffic flow. I've seen trucks in there. I cringe. 18-wheelers pull up on Mass Street. They go past the station. Then the beep, 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 beep starts, and they're backing into the lot to try to do their deliveries. You know, traffic's all stopped and nobody can move. I think, again, with the ingress, that's gonna be an issue. With the store occupying more space in the lot, this will hamper even further the ability for them to enter or for anybody to get into the parking lot if they're in the middle of blocking that particular entrance. The proposed new gasoline pumps are now being turned directly towards the buildings on South Mass Street. Unfortunately, Dick and I are in the house that's gonna get probably the brunt of it, and then Chris and Katie will be the next ones. So their lights will be, you know, getting towards our houses when they come in to fill up, if they happen to come in from Mountain Road. They have got on their plans to put a little stone wall 3 feet high and then some trees to maybe block the lights, but I guess it's okay if you have a car there, but if you have a truck getting gas or whatever, then, you know, everything will be coming into our windows.
Does that currently happen right now?
Yeah, it does to a point, if, depending upon how the traffic comes into the station or what they're doing. May not be getting gas, but they might be doing something else there.
Okay.
And typically, you know, when the station closes at 10 o'clock at night, the station's closed, the lights go off. But you guys would be surprised what goes on there at night. There are people in that parking lot all night long, sitting there with their cars running, their lights going, and I really don't know what they're doing, checking messages or whatever. But again, that's disturbance of people in there that shouldn't be conducting business because there's nothing open, I don't think. I don't think you can get gas at night with a credit card if the store's closed. I don't know that, but maybe that's what they're doing.
Do you infer that those are employees or people from Cumberland Farms or just
No,
people?
they're just people driving that just pull in there to do whatever, yeah. And then delivery trucks, on occasion, not always, but on occasion, sometimes show up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning to drop off their stuff. The store doesn't open till 5. But, you know, these trucks are out there with their engines idling, and it's just not a happy situation. The other part of the variance was for the internally illuminated sign, and I tried to listen, you know, when he was talking about it. Very small portions of the sign will be illuminated. I'm not sure really what that means, very small portions, and I think you were addressing the size of the sign. But he also said that there was gonna be a rolling sign. I hope that's not like a sign that keeps going around, that's on all the time,
Right,
so.
I think on both those questions, both of those elements of the sign that are up there could be illuminated from internal, and there wouldn't be any rolling. The rolling, I think, inferred that they could go out there and change it mechanically, and that was the rolling. But
Okay.
they can address that. yeah.
Okay, all right.
Did they show us a picture of the sign?
And I, you know, part of the variance request is you really have to go through the 5 steps to, you know, to gain the request itself with the approval and stuff. But, you know, talking about diminish the property values and, you know, that's gonna be a really hard thing because there's already Cumberland Farms there. So I cannot say that putting another one in there is gonna make any difference. It may or it may not. So truly, I'll be honest, our property value's already affected. I knew that moving in, but we chose to live there. So that's really not a concern of mine, but it may be for the other neighbors. And And for the hardship for number 5, I think you guys have already said this. They have a spot, there is no hardship. They could tear that building down and put another one up in the same footprint. To me, them taking this whole thing and moving it back because the neighbors, it's gonna help the neighbors in the back, it's helping their bottom line. It's helping their bottom line. They have a business model, he said that 7 times. They don't care about Goffstown Village, they have a business model. And I think if they took the time to investigate the neighborhood, they would have seen what the village is all about. And maybe come up with a design that sort of better suited it, but that wasn't as big. I mean, this is just gonna be the biggest thing in Goffstown. Is that what we need? I don't think it is.
Do you believe that they have template buildings, that they can build them from special design, or, you know, McDonald's tend to be templates, right? If you're thinking of other
Well,
businesses.
you know, if you look at all the, I'm trying to think of the community that's in, I don't know if it's Wilton or someplace there that's got a special, Amherst maybe it was, a Dunkin' Donuts that fit into the community. They made them do that with the area that they were in. Is that something that we need to be doing here? I think it would sort of, you know, if they want to be good neighbors for Goffstown, try to do something that is going to benefit the community. We are trying to keep a rural character here, we're trying to maintain it. I mean, even the master plan, you know, goes through all that stuff, and thinking that we're still in the Main Street program of our house happens to be the end of it. I mean, you're still on the main street, keep it the community that it is. Let's not turn this into, you know, Route 101, because that's what's gonna happen. We've already been through the process for, and this is irregardless, but if we do this, Dunkin' Donuts moves out, then Dunkin' Donuts is thinking of buying the house next door. I just have a vision that this is what's gonna happen, and I don't want that for Goffstown, I really don't. I'm happy with Cumberland Farms, I like them, again, I will say that, but I just think this building is not the right building.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Webb? Thank you.
Thanks.
Brian, just a follow-up question on our roles and the planning boards. As I believe it, is that we are being asked about the setbacks, that they can encroach into the setbacks into this far. But it's really, unless we make it a condition or some other thing, it's really the planning board that decides how big that building is, how many parking spots it is, all of those specific items. They could say it's too big for this piece of property, it's too big for this
No, we have
portion
to
of
say it.
town.
We have to say it.
I believe in looking at the setbacks themselves, the zoning board does have the right to say, well, I think this building could be smaller, or I think that it fits and is okay.
But the planning board can do that as well, correct?
Planning board,
Sizing.
yeah. Planning board can comment on the size of the building. However, they're gonna look to whatever is approved by this board, by way of variance, because a building is not gonna necessarily fit very well within the prescribed setback area. And so if any variance is approved, or if any building is approved, it's most likely going to be by variance.
Yeah. I guess my point is, if we granted the side, rear setbacks to make it to fit the size of the building they're proposing, okay, but the planning board can say, you know what, yeah, I can make it that big, but I don't believe it needs to be that big, and they can shrink it.
They can't go
They-
into the,
They can't increase into the setbacks and stuff, I understand
They can't
that.
go any further into the setback, but they can,
They can manipulate the size of the building, the location.
and the
within that
applicant
range.
could do that in the interim as well.
Yeah, okay.
Does anybody know where the village plan is that used to be hanging on this wall? It showed the footprints of the buildings.
Nope. Andrew's looking.
Can I think we should take a look at that.
Sure.
That shows the existing footprints of the buildings in the village.
Thanks, Andrew.
Can someone point out where that intersection is?
I don't know, High Street, South Mast.
It's not even close.
It's not on
Not
there.
even close, right? It's off the map.
Yeah, I don't see it.
But it's down in the bottom right-hand corner is where it'd be.
It is
Way-
off the map.
It's way off the map.
Oh,
Okay.
So Piscataqua's on the edge there, on the bottom edge. Okay. All right, is there any other abutters or interested parties? Please come forward.
Thank you. My name is Khaled Hawk.
Can you spell your name?
Khaled. Last name is Hawk, Haque. I'm the abutter that everybody keeps talking about, right behind the
Okay.
gas station.
You.
Yeah, that's me. And I never had a discussion with this gentleman here or saying that it was okay to push the setback to my the boundary limits. I'm not okay with that. What I did discuss with them, and I think, honestly, I think it'd be a mistake not to let them change the sign, because I think it'll reduce the illumination of what it is right now, so it'll help the neighborhood. I think it'll be better for the neighborhood to have a sign that's smaller with less illumination coming out of it than what it is right now. Because it's gonna be, from what you can, and I drive by it every day, in the morning, at night, I see it all the time. The sign is too big for what it is. What they're proposing, I think, is a very good idea, first of all. So I think the sign is a good idea. I agree with my neighbors that the building is too big. I agree that it could be kept the same space. If they can't keep the same space, yes, grow it. But I don't believe there's a need to put a setback to the back or to the left-hand side, whereas there's neighbors. Neither, I know for myself, and Teresa also was on the side of us. Also, I've spoken to her recently, and she said, we don't want the building coming closer to our house. It's close enough as it is. Well, on the other side, if you go towards Mountain Road, on the right-hand side, if you're looking at the building to the right-hand side going towards Mountain Road, yes, you can increase to that side and increase the building that way. That'll not hurt any of the neighbors because it's not going towards anybody's house. Also, a lot of the kids, as my other neighbor had said, a lot of the kids after hours, I've had to call the police a couple of times to come and get the kids out of there because they're making a lot of noise at nighttime, even after they're closed. So adding building material to that side will, I believe, help keep the kids away. Also, what I did mention to them was that increasing the building size that way, when people are coming to park, will prevent the headlights from coming to the back area of the building. That'll help us also, because that does create a disturbance late at night.
Okay.
Question, get anything, honey?
But you did say you thought that the increase of the store was a bit much.
I do. I think it's a good size now. Yes. Could they increase? Could they do better with the bigger size building? Of course they could. I think it'd be better for business. It'd be better for the neighborhood also. But I don't believe they need to increase it by going towards the residential areas further. I don't believe that's a necessity. I don't think, as you said, and I agree with my neighbors, there's a reason why the ordinances are there, and it'll be hurtful to the neighborhood, if you will.
They made a comment that by moving it back, it eliminates the activity that may go on behind the building. Is that an issue now?
There is no issue behind the building. It's always an issue to the side of the building.
Yeah.
What goes on behind the building? Is there a drive back there?
There's
Is
no
there
drive. It's barely a cement pad, if you will. They use it for storage mostly.
Okay.
And it slopes down.
It,
When you
yeah,
go-
it's,
it
it's
goes
a down,
right
it's
down,
a
it goes
downhill
right
grade,
down,
so there's
downhill.
the kids really can't hang out back
Okay.
there, if you will. Where they do hang out is onto
Drainage
the
is an
side,
issue.
towards Mountain Road.
What type of screening is between your property and the back of the building right now?
There isn't any screening, just a couple of trees that are back there. My wife has some pictures if you guys want to take a look at it. There's our fence, but that's just a mesh wire fence. So there is really no screening except for the trees right
So
now.
it's your fence, and they don't have a fence line there, is that you're aware
Not
of?
really, no, there
Okay.
is no fence line there right now.
Well, the planning
From,
board could,
Do you have
Not
any,
from
do
Cumberland Farms.
you have any
Planning
drainage
board.
issues?
yeah.
Could recommend either.
Yes,
Do you have drainage issues with that,
yes.
as
there
it is now? Yeah.
Yes, there are some drainage issues. I mean, especially at winter time when all the snow gets pushed back, they've destroyed our fences several times, they've destroyed trees several times. We've had to go talk to them on numerous occasions to try and have that fixed.
Do you believe the way they proposed it here, by having parking spots there, or I think there's a dumpster on one side and there's maybe parking spots the other, that that would eliminate that, or?
Well, what they're proposing now is extending the building out to the sides. That'll eliminate some of that pushback where they have now, where they're pushing the snow back. That's why I said it'd be helpful if they pushed it out to the side, on at least to the road. That way, there is no way the plows can actually push the snow back onto private property.
Yeah.
The issue that, the only issue I have with that is that the way you enter and exit the Cumberland Farms, if the snow is pushed into certain locations, which is concerning a bit on the plans, you can't, you block your vision of turning when you're exiting the Cumberland Farms.
Matter of fact, we mentioned the same issue to
Yeah.
them when they originally showed this to us back in March, I believe.
Yeah.
We said, if you're gonna expand the building, where the heck are you gonna put the snow? There's no space, according to their plans. The only way they're gonna get all the snow out of there is to put it onto dump trucks every single time there's a big snowstorm and get it out of there right away.
Yeah.
If they push it onto any of the sides, you're gonna block every single view there is.
One of the areas I wanted to put it was, I think the snow was going to be up by where the sign is presently. Where the sign is presently, they're designating that as one of the areas. And I believe my concern is similar to yours in that it becomes a visual blocking for cars coming in and out. And
I agree with you. I mean, that would be ridiculous. I mean, it'd be impossible to make a turn without seeing where you're going. You basically have to nose out into the road to make a turn at that point.
that angle from when you come down Mountain Road to go onto Mass Road and to take a right there, that angle right at times, and I would assume that something like this might clean it up, but right now, if there's snow there, if we have very, very, very large amounts of snow, which we have considerably had, it piles up on that corner there, the town trucks, actually, the town snow from Mountain Road goes there, and it becomes a traffic hazard. And I don't, based upon how they're showing here, I have a little bit of concern about continuing to put the snow there.
They do have a note on there, though, that says excess snow will be removed from the site. So if they get to a point where they need to remove snow, that their note covers that they will remove it.
Any other questions for Mr. Hawk? Thank you. Any other abutters? Interested parties? Ma'am? From the far back.
Who's next door?
Hello, my
Evening.
name is Teresa Golding, and I live right beside the Gulf Station. In April, I think I wrote everybody on the board a letter
Yes.
with some of my concerns, and I understand that some of them aren't relevant to the zoning board, and they'll go to the planning board. But some of what I'm concerned about is on these two variances is the 17.9 foot variance that's going to be on my property line, from my property line. And to me, that's a drastic variance. And it's important to point out that variance will really be from my property line. My home is 3 to 7 feet from the property line. So that variance will not, it'll probably be like 25 feet from my home, the building itself. It's going to be very close, because my property line is 3 to 7 feet from my home. And it would, I think, kind of be key for you to come out and take a look, maybe park in my driveway and see how close the line is to that. I'm concerned about that 18-foot variance. In that space, there's going to be garbage dumpsters, parking spots, and also possibly a loading zone for 18-wheelers. So that, again, will put these things very close to my home. The house itself, the building will have big compressors on top of it, the store, And again, those compressors, I'm imagining that they're gonna be pretty loud, and they'll be running 24/7. And that's, again, will be, 25 to 30 feet from my home, somewhere that someone's trying to sleep at night.
Can I just make a quick correction
Sure.
to something you said?
Uh-huh.
The 17.9-foot setback that they're requesting is from the west property line, and your house, I think, is on the east property line. Is that right?
I looked at, when I came and visited I thought it was that,
Your house is on this side, right? That's you, Teresa Golden?
yes.
Their setback here on this side is 41.4 feet to the property
Oh.
line.
I thought it was the 17.9 was in the corner back there.
Nope.
Okay, okay, thank you. The plan is also building a retaining wall and a 6-foot fence on the property line. And right now, there's a existing vegetation buffer, which is huge trees. And I brought some pictures to kind of show you what's there today. And my understanding is those will all be taken down. And the retaining wall will be pushed to the property line, and then a 6-foot fence will be built. So all those trees will be gone, that natural buffer won't be there anymore. So I'll be able to, see that whole site, the lights, everything will be, coming right onto my home, or at least the second story of the house. In a previous meeting, I think it might have been at the abutters meeting, the Goffstown Main Street program really stressed the importance to them to have more green. And the way this site is going to end up, we'll have less green if all those trees that have been there for many years are going to get cut down. And right now, they really are right on the property line itself, so I imagine they're going to be gone. Again, that vegetation buffer is a natural border and screening that is key to my property. And I think I mentioned to you previously in the letter is that I have a porch, a back porch, that's very close to the Gulf Station. And I can't imagine if traffic's gonna get pushed towards my house, that it's gonna be pretty unbearable to be on that porch. And the noise will be a lot more than it is today. I think that if you approve this variances, you're gonna be approving snowplows plowing at 4 in the morning, very close to my home, and very close to my mother's bedroom. So I think everything's gonna get shifted towards my property line, and that's a concern to me. The parking, the loading and unloading of these tankers, and the delivery trucks. And again, this isn't a concern for this board, but again, if these variances are allowed, the driveway, the main exit for the Cumberland Farms is also gonna be pushed closer to my home, closer to my driveway. And I think, as Judy mentioned, until you live there, you don't know how hard it is to live next to this gas station the way it stands today. And if it gets bigger, more traffic, more congestion, no place for people to go, because my driveway right now is their alternate parking. When people have a big vehicle and they can't get through their parking lot, they stop in front of my house and run over there. So I just envision this continually or getting worse if these variances get approved.
Okay.
And that's
If the facility were to stay at the size it would be, in the relative location it would be, are your concerns, do they go away, or do they still exist at some level?
Oh, I have a lot of concerns. Right now, garbage from that site is a constant nightmare. Noise at night. At 10 o'clock, when the lights go down, it really does, it's a world of difference. It's much better, it's manageable, but at 4 o'clock, they start coming in. If there's snow, they're plowing, dumpsters, when they drop those dumpsters, when they're picking them up and dropping them, my whole house shakes. So I think it's hard now, it's a nightmare now, but I understood that when I bought the house. Although it was 17 years ago and it's changed drastically in 17 years. I can't tell you what a difference it is. So I am concerned. I kind of bought that house thinking that gas station wasn't going to change. And I had hoped the town would make sure of that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you, Ms. Holden. Any other abutters? Yeah.
Honey, you forgot something.
And your name is?
Karen Hawk.
Good evening.
Honey, forgot something. That's what she said.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, one of the things is the garbage that Teresa was just talking about. We do have a lot of garbage from the Cumberland Farms, and one of our concerns is that garbage is always there, it never gets picked up unless we, constantly have to ask them, and even then, it's not really ever picked up. If the store is allowed to become bigger, we do worry that the amount of trash is going to become tenfold than what it is. We go out and pick it up, but we shouldn't have to go out there to pick it up. We can't mow a portion of our lawn because the garbage is there. We've had our blades on our lawnmower warp, if you will, and they grind because it warped because of the stuff that we're running over. So that one portion, and I'm sure you've seen it driving by, that one portion remains untouched because we can't afford to keep replacing our lawnmower blades if we dare to go over there. We've tried to use the push mower on it, but there's so much debris in there that it kicks back at us, so it's a dangerous, situation. And we have a puppy, and our poor puppy doesn't really even get to play in our yard because unleashed. We take him on the leash. He can't run around unleashed in the fenced-in part because there's garbage, and we don't know what he's going to get into. Okay. So he doesn't have that, luxury of going out to play, if you will. He's restricted. So Honey wanted me to tell you that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's a nickname, Honey? Is that you? We all have it. They're all good. Any other abutters or interested parties that has not yet spoken? Sir?
My name is Chris Wendland. I live across the street at 3 South Mass Street.
Can you spell your last name?
Yep, Wendlandt.
Okay.
All the variances being applied for tonight do not directly affect me, but I'm afraid if they get approved, it will directly affect me. The way the site plan is set up with the pumps now aiming down my driveway, headlights aiming down the house. It's not, it's not much of a big problem now because the sun goes down at 8 o'clock. But around 4 o'clock in the winter, it makes a big difference when you have, headlights shining down. And as far as Teresa Golding, I also share a driveway. It can be very difficult. I couldn't imagine sharing a driveway with an entire gas station, so. I'm just showing support for my neighbors. I just don't think it's a good idea to push back on these people's properties and to cut down all those trees especially, so.
Okay.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Abutters, interested parties? Pam?
Oh, this is mine.
Could you put up the site plan, please? Cynthia Bovier, Chairman, Goffstown Main Street Design Team.
Can you spell your last name?
Boisvert.
She can. She's excellent.
We met with the abutters and with Cumberland Farms regarding Main Street development, and so we, and as the design team, we reviewed everything. We are in support of this project. I think we do appreciate all of the abutters' concerns. However, I also believe that most of the trucks, the traffic, the garbage, snow, they all do exist now, and they will all exist again. With regards to, it is an existing gas station, it is an existing convenience store. and I'm sure we've all been inside there, it is very crowded inside there. The new design, in that it is a larger square footage, it is a more handicap accessible, it's just a better design inside for virtually freezer, milk, coffee, food, whatever. It's a better design within the store. One of the main things that the Goffstown Main Street, we're very interested in is green space, and that I understand about that side buffer. However, this design is much better, a lot more green space. They have said they'd work with us on the planting. I believe if you think about this station right now, all you think about is the sea of asphalt. There's a lot of asphalt. There's going to be, the pavement is going to be, the entrances are going to be better defined. The green space around that little freestanding wall at the front along South Mast is going to be landscaped as well. They are hindered by existing overhead poles, so we're kind of limited by shade trees or flowering trees, but we've already been talking to them about, well, how can we get trees in there, or screen trees, or to help the abutters. So that is one thing that, it's not under what you do, but they have already talked to us about it, and then, it is a recommendation, and we understand, Main Street is tough to get any street trees. I mean, I think we found 3 places along Main Street from the bridge to Sully's that we could put new street trees. So, but this is one site that, right now, we could work with them to put some maybe small flowering trees where there isn't anything right now. So aesthetically, with regards to the pavement, the traffic flow, right now, because where the building sits, the big trucks, it is very difficult. With the building being pushed back, it actually makes the larger trucks that already go there a better flow. So it truly is a better design than what is there right now. They did discuss with us a sign, and the sign is something that the planning board does have Main Street review. And again, we don't really have any authority. We work with Brian, but we do try to work with what people may want to do. And this is a case where that design of that building, the architectural elements of that building, are a lot more. They're just a lot more complementary to what is going on with the other homes in the area. It would be aesthetically a more pleasing building, and I believe that they had Cumberland Farms. Sometimes they put a half stone facade. They're not going to here because the homes here, they're more slab earth. So they went through a lot of things with this design that they talked to us about. So with regards to that. With regards to the site design, I know that you were talking about 3 spaces less, but the amount of traffic that goes in and out of there, and for the most part, people are we run in, we run out, we do that. And right now, the spaces, and with all the pavement, it's less safe than this design would be, because this design truly has, this is where you park and this is where you're going to drive. But right now, I think trucks are parking here, they do this, they do that. So this whole new design. And with regards to the zoning board, I do think that it is the variants are inherent in the land, and the variances that they're asking for is inherent in this land. It is an existing business that has always been there, and our view is they are really trying to make it better. They are. It's aesthetically, it's going to be more attractive. It's basically the same business with a better design, less pumps, more traffic control. And they have, as I say, they have already made changes to the plan that That little wall in the front to block the traffic light, that's pretty big for a big corporation like Cumberland Farms to consider something like that, because maintenance and building and taking care of it, it's a lot, but they understand that those are the headlights. As they're going in, they're going out, and it also kind of creates that space. It actually, it's going to slow everybody down, and it creates that space. And I think in sitting back on the lot, I don't know, if you think about it, well, if it sat in the middle of the site, it would be closer to all the homes, the building would, you'd have a traffic flow around it. I think for that site, and where it sits right there, it is a very good design, so.
Okay.
Any questions?
Anyone have any questions? Thank you, Cynthia. I think we just about got everybody in the audience. Anyone else?
No.
Attorney?
Thank you. I just want to touch on a few points that were made. And I want to put this in context as well. In your zone, you allow a building coverage of a lot in this zone to be 40% of the lot. The proposal that we're providing is 12.8% of the lot. So I'd like everyone to kind of step back and consider the context of what your zoning ordinance allows.
Is that the building including the pumps, or just the building?
The building. And the maximum size that's permitted in the zone is 15,000 square feet for a building. So that needs to be considered as well. We're obviously far below that and far below the percentage max coverage, which obviously is how you control smaller sites that may not be able to put a building of 15,000 square feet. So again, we're at 12.8%, where your zoning ordinance would allow 40%. I wanted to reemphasize that it has always been the intent of Cumberland Farms to keep the building as far as over to Mountain Road as we can. The relief requested there is significant for that purpose, to move as close as we can to Mountain Road. The relief that we're asking for with respect to the abutter on the east side is roughly 8.5 feet, which is just the building in terms of your 50-foot requirement. If we were not near a residential zone, your requirements in a regular commercial zone would be, we would meet them with ease. But again, your 50-foot requirement is 8 feet away from basically what we're proposing. Keep in mind that the building is not going to also have a set of windows, if you will, or any kind of activity geared towards pointing towards the abutter. And we're only looking, again, for a building setback. And I'm far less than 8 feet, but you have to consider that that's the only form of relief we're asking for on that side.
What do you think the public purposes of a 50-foot setback when it's abutting a residential zone are for?
I think they're to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the inhabitants, which is your goal. And I think that our plan does that as best we can. And when any applicant for a variance can't do that, we ask for a variance. And we believe we've met the criteria for that. But I just wanted to point out that the difference in terms of what is permitted and what we're asking for is just that distance. It's not a significant deviation from what is actually required. Now, on the Mountain Road side, it is, and it's for all the reasons that the abutters suggested. Because you want to shift as much as you can to that portion of the property. So we have done that. I also want to point out that a lot of the issues that were raised are planning board issues. One of them is buffering, screening, fencing. And we have proposed fencing along the east side and the entire rear side in our site plan. And those are issues that obviously are going to come up in front of the planning board. But we've already addressed that by suggesting that we would put all of that fencing. That's clearly going to stop what may exist now in terms of garbage or debris, which is just a natural byproduct of any commercial business. It's obviously not something that Cumberland Farms promotes in terms of promoting garbage flying from their business. It's the last thing they want to do. If you look at their sites, all the recent sites, one in Plastow, one in Epsom, you'll see very meticulous sites, very well run, well supported by the community, and received very, very well. And that would be the intent here. And again, with the proposal for the fencing along those areas, we think we're obviously going to address the main concerns that are raised. One of the abutters suggested that we were turning this into what exists at the Shell station. I think everyone that looks at that station would come to the conclusion that that's far different than what we're proposing. We're proposing a site that blends well with the surrounding area and respects the property rights of Cumberland Farm, but at the same time minimize the effects on the abutters. And a lot of those issues will be dealt with at the planning board level as well. Do you want anything else?
That's it.
Questions? Thank you.
Any last questions from the board?
For the site plan aspect of it, is it going to be necessary to remove all those trees from the east side in order to make this plan work? Do they have to come out?
They don't have to. It's an issue that we'll address square on with the planning board. If the abutters, our preference is to not, we're not going into the process to make it harder on the abutters. We believe we have a reasonable use that we're proposing. But when we get to the site plan review, if they'd rather have trees there, then we'd obviously consider that, particularly the existing trees. We're not looking to take down the things that provide a buffer, and we are looking at obviously creating a buffer that works for the abutters as well. And that will be the concern of the planning board, and we'll have to address that concern adequately to their liking.
And
As a board, we can still make recommendations, all right?
is the hardship of the existing facility one of economics?
Well, the case law suggested you could now consider that. We're not arguing that, but you could consider. You could actually now consider making that argument. We're not suggesting that. We're looking at the setbacks, and we're looking at the side yard setbacks. And the hardship really is that we have a very small lot, and what we're left with is right up there in terms of our ability to meet the setbacks would produce a result that's not a reasonable use for that property, considering also that there's an existing gasoline station.
So is it my understanding that Cumberland Farms purchased this piece of property within the last year?
No.
When did they purchase the property?
I don't know the exact date, but they've owned it for quite a while.
We acquired this from Exxon in 2003, I believe.
2003.
The Gulf.
Okay. And when you purchased the property, were the existing setbacks in the zoning ordinance at that time?
I do not know the answer to that.
They probably were.
Okay.
To me, it's not
So
relevant.
Well, to me, it is relevant that you purchased a piece of property that had 50-foot setbacks for you to operate a business.
Right.
And
Irrespective of when that property was purchased, we believe that the plan in front of you, where we're asking for variances, as anyone would when they can't meet your zoning criteria, it should be judged separately from that issue. And there's no self-induced hardship. We're planning to remove the entire building and have a building that is a reasonable use and one that basically, addresses the hardship criteria, which has nothing to do with the expectations when you bought it, even though they bought it quite a while ago. And it's just that we can't meet those criteria, and that's what everyone asks of you when they come and ask for a variance.
usually when they ask for a variance, there's something really, really, really unique about the issue that, for instance, the properties down in Pinardville and the size of the properties, and if they're going to put something on that they would need a variance for a setback because they were small and they were there before zoning
Yeah, and
went
this,
into effect.
this lot is.
This lot has been this lot and has been with these same setbacks
That's right.
within zoning. And that's the issue that I'm
Well,
making here, is that the
It
setbacks
doesn't
were.
meet the current, it
I'm
never
just-
met the zoning. And again, it is a unique lot in terms of the depth, and the size of this is quite small for the commercial zone.
Okay.
And the location next to the intersection as well is quite unique.
Is it an all or nothing proposition in that if we agreed with, say the side setbacks, but didn't like the back, the rear setback, is it something that, the application is in front of us, it is what it is, we would action it as it is.
Right.
I'm not in the mood of picking and parsing it apart.
Right.
So, that's something you'd have to think about, obviously, depends on how we come out of this.
Right.
I was thinking out loud there, I guess.
It would be difficult to invest what you need to invest to make it look right for the town to not have the relief.
Any last questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any last information before we close the public hearing on this? Do we believe we need any additional information? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing on this application. And I move that we don't deliberate on this one right away. We'll do the Apple case first.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay? And Len has stepped out, must be to the restroom. That
Wanna
may be
take
a
a
good
5-minute
idea.
break?
Let's take 5. We're gonna come back and then, how late is everybody able to stay? Serious?
Work the next day.
Get up for work.
I hear you. Me too.
This is just a volunteer.
I hear you.
Yes, I knew they were gonna be 2 big cases.
A little bit.
Andrew? All right. Thank you for letting us take that few minutes break. We're going to do the deliberations now. The public hearing has been closed on both the applications this evening. We're going to do deliberations on the Alpha Carter case. Any comments from the board? Questions or motions?
Well, I'll start. When I was reading over the minutes, it caught my attention about, on page 2, that the attorney Connell stated that this is a permitted use by special exception according to the zoning ordinance section 311J6. I'm not in full agreement with that. I do agree that, if I can find it. A facility for processing animal products is allowed as a special exception. However, if one goes and looks at table 3, the principal uses table 31I,
What page are you on?
page 18, under manufacturing, construction, and wholesale trade, one will notice that number 7 states that wholesale establishments are not permitted in agricultural districts. Furthermore, in the minutes, on page 8, it states that Nagash Abdikator said, "We are in the wholesale business." Furthermore, if you go to the same principal use section of manufacturing, construction, and wholesale trade, it states on the first one, manufacturing, fabrication, assembly, packaging, and other similar industries are not allowed under agricultural. What our zoning ordinance is saying to us is that if you have a farm and it's in the agricultural district, you have the right to process your animal products. But our ordinance is also saying to us, you have the right to process your animal products, but you do not have the right to wholesale them as an establishment in the agricultural district. Whether or not we subdivide this property, it still would be that the wholesale and the processing of animal products is not permitted in an agricultural district.
Comment or thoughts on that?
Based upon that, I was going to make a motion to deny the application.
Can we talk about that?
Yes, yes, we can. We can make a motion. If you want to put it on the table, we can discuss it.
Okay, I won't stop you. Do what you want to do.
I make a motion based upon those reasons that we deny the application for a slaughterhouse, which is a manufacturing, packaging of animal products for wholesaling, which is not allowed in the agricultural district.
Thoughts?
I'll second that, but I have some additional comments. But can I add
Well, let's not.
part of the reason?
Yeah, I mean, unless you was exactly in the wholesale and everything. Yeah, I think, I mean, you can second what she's saying.
She's saying for discussion, yeah.
I'm seconding it, but I have other, she's making a motion to deny for that reason. I have additional reasons.
All right, so let's talk about what you're seconding first before we add it, because she probably needs to, add it and stuff like that. So let's just talk about what our thoughts are here before we fully make the motion, if that's okay, to make it cleaner. Brian, any discussion on when you were speaking with the applicant? I imagine you spoke with the applicant when they put together this application and brought it to you. And referencing the specific zoning ordinances, did they come to you saying they needed relief from the specific ordinance? Did you advise them? Did the town discuss them? How did we get to the specific items in the application that we got to? Because what was brought up, this wholesale, hasn't been talked about, period. We never asked a question on it. We never said, but shouldn't you be getting a variance from such and such? In this case, the applicant didn't get a chance to respond.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, my understanding is that the reason why it has been considered under the agricultural section and not the industrial section was perhaps twofold. One, because the list provides a specific definition for processing of animal processing facility, which is a very close description of what this facility would be. They are going to process animals. And I think when you're trying to find a use category for specific uses to fall under, you look for the closest one that it fits. And you use that as your basis of, okay, this is the use we're fitting it under, and it fits most closely to this use that's in the agricultural district. It says processing of animal processing facility, and then you move forward with that specified use. If the board were going to use more than one use as a specified use, I think that would have to be
We'd have to pick one,
addressed.
right? We'd have to pick one.
Yeah, we really need to pick one use unless they're applying to have, you know, more than one use, which technically I guess they are applying to have more than one use, but it's the use of single-family residential and animal processing facility. So, that, and I'll also add that they stated in the meeting that they were going to be not necessarily packaging. It was going to be, you know, cutting an animal in half or something and selling it, and the further packaging and all that kind of stuff would be done by butchers at restaurants or at stores, wherever they sell the meat to.
Right.
That it wouldn't really be a packaging facility.
So back to the question I had, in your role, do you recall that when they came to you, did they come to you saying, we need relief from this specific criteria on this specific page? Or do you recall if you advised them which applied?
No, it was their, well, I think it's kind of a question and answer thing when they come in the door. They say, you know, I would like to do this on my property, and how do I do it? Or in this case, he had already been through the process once, and so he had an idea, and he sort of knew the direction that he was going, and been given advice by the court and by the board and by everybody back in the day. And so he was moving forward along that line, and so he already had the idea of what he was needing and what he needed to do. And
So the town has a role in helping the applicant try to identify which specific criteria, because they're not an expert in the zoning ordinance. We ask them to be familiar with it, and we work in that Q&A, like you said, and you get to a point where I believe this is what you need the specific relief from. Let's go forward with that application. That's what we have.
And I think if the board were to deny it tonight based on the fact that it doesn't fit best into that animal processing facility, I think the board might be remiss in doing that, because the board has already given the applicant guidance in the past saying, really, you need to come back and apply for a special exception to do this in the variance. And if we now tell them, well, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to allow you to do this because now we feel like it's
This other variant.
this other thing, then that might be,
Okay.
that might not be good.
The description of the agricultural district in our zoning ordinance is the agricultural district is a mixed-use district established to accommodate residential developments at low densities in a rural setting, together with agricultural, forestry, outdoor recreation, and other compatible uses on large lots where municipal utilities may not be present and anticipated.
How does that relate to the discussion we just had on whether or not they came in asking for the right variance against the right?
Well, I wanted to state that because we were talking about the mixed-use district, or the mixture of having a processing facility and a residential facility
On the same
lot.
But that's different, I think, than what that says.
A district is the agricultural district is a mixed-use district established.
That
So-
anticipate you could have the
That's
adjoining
supports-
lots, you could, or next lots to each other, you could have those different uses in it. It doesn't say that it's okay or not okay based on that. on
Oh,
a
okay, I see
specific
how
lot.
you're interpreting. I'm interpreting that there would be mixed uses within the district and possibly within the lot. But I specifically am stating that the zoning ordinance is very specific, that wholesaling is not permitted, and Mr. Abdicator has stated that it is a wholesale business.
Any other comments? So with that discussion, do you still have a second on that?
But I have more to say. Can I say that now?
Is it related to the criteria specified as the wholesale?
No. It's other reasons. You don't have to just give one reason. You
No,
shouldn't give
no.
one reason.
Yeah, I think it just complicates the situation, you know, so if we're to deny it, and they were to come back to say, okay, how am I supposed to appeal this? Is it against I used the wrong criteria, or is it that that we maybe don't like, that it doesn't meet the hardship criteria? I mean, which, it's not very clean. And my discussion is, I can't believe if we thought that, we didn't ask the question to the applicant or Brian while the public hearing was open.
But it
I
was
really am
asked,
troubled.
because he answered that it
They
was.
asked
No,
last
no,
meeting.
this wasn't asked. It wasn't said, hey, can you reference page 18? We think it's actually, Brian, the principal use is page 18, item I, line 7. Why didn't we do that? We've done that before in other applications, and we have this back and forth of, is this really the right one, or how do we process it? This is a blind side.
Yeah.
I am
agree with
really
you on
troubled
that.
by it.
Several meetings without question.
Oy. I understand the bigger picture. I mean, what you may add or what we may talk about, but speaking to what are they actually applying for? And as Brian said, we pushed them back once before that said, I understand you need a special exception. We believe that you need a variance. We denied the rehearing. They went to court. The court says, okay, you need a variance. Go back if you want it. They came back for a variance. We identified the variance that they needed for. We've heard the case. The third meeting, this is the third
Yeah.
meeting
Yeah.
for this application. It's the first time we heard that it didn't fit.
This
what
should have
their
been, this should have been
application was.
addressed in a public session.
And at the first one, if we had it, if we knew it then. So,
It wasn't until this morning, when I sat down to look over what was going on, that I sat here and I went through every single one of these pages, because I really wanted to get what I felt the ordinance was saying was permitted and wasn't permitted within the agricultural district. So I went through every single one of the principal uses. I went through residential, educational, institutional, entertainment and recreation, services.
so why does it not apply? The one that we've have is the table A6, the principal
Well,
residential use.
It really wasn't until I
Wasn't it
went,
brought to the attention of the board in the public session so that it could have been addressed?
I'm really troubled.
I am too. I think, I agree with you. I think it's a blind side.
I mean, we can make a finding, we can take a vote on, do we think this is an issue, and want to change it, like we think they can't. I mean, I would much rather say, if that was truly the case, that we would say, you know what, I think we're asking about the wrong thing. Maybe you go down the road, and I'm not advocating this, but you say, I think we deny it without prejudice. They go back, reapply for the right variance, and then come back and say, all right, this is really what we meant. Okay.
What position are we putting ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tenuous legal situation. I mean, we're just delaying, which, all right. But for what public
why?
purpose
How
are
do-
we?
how do- how do
What
you- I
public
don't
purpose
understand.
are we saying, that this is the right one and this is the wrong one? Does it really, really?
because it really, really states that wholesale businesses are not allowed in the agricultural district.
Due to the
And this is the
fact-
time of deliberation, and this is the time the board should deliberate it.
But due to the fact that we didn't question that, whether it was wholesale.
Yeah.
I mean, due to the fact that we were basically not doing our homework. I mean, look at it.
Because,
I'm
because,
concerned.
because,
On
because
this
you read the
matter.
minutes, and you read the minutes, and this is what the courts are gonna read.
I hear you.
And this is what the minutes say, and this is what the applicant has said in his own words.
And why didn't we question it when he said it?
I wasn't here.
Why didn't we question it in the public hearing portion of this evening?
Of this evening even,
We had that opportunity.
yeah.
And again, I want to emphasize the fact that this really needs to fit into one land use. It can't be animal processing facility and wholesale thing at the same time. It cannot.
It's gotta be one or the other.
It's like trying to call a single family and multifamily at the same time.
And what is a
Just-
wholesale establishment? Is it wholesale that he sells it on his property, or is it a wholesale that he's sending it out to be wholesaled?
You have to fit it into the most
His business
closely
is
related
wholesaling meat,
land use.
whether it be on the property or off the property. His business is wholesaling the meat.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to have that question and answer session to ask, are you really speaking wholesale, or was just a word that was thrown out, but it really doesn't meet the definition of what he was thinking? Yes, it's in the minutes, but maybe he didn't really mean to say wholesale. Maybe it doesn't write the right definition, but now because he used the word, we gotta match it up. So what I recommend to get past this is still a motion.
I'll leave the motion on the table, and we can decide what we'll do with it after we hear what Joanne has to offer.
Yeah, I think maybe something else we can,
I'll table the motion for the moment.
or it might be something else we can work with, you know?
Okay. I have a couple of things. Under the variance, one of the items that they would have to prove is that the values of the surrounding property will not be diminished. And I am not convinced of that. And I do feel that we need further information from an expert, which to me would be an appraisal. They did not choose to submit anything. I cannot agree that it would not diminish the surrounding property values.
Now, a number of abutters and interested parties made that statement. They made the statement that they believed that it would diminish property values, even if it was in a letter that said it would diminish property values.
And what I'm saying is that I don't believe the applicant proved that it would not. They're saying that it would not, but I don't believe that they proved it would not. To me, proving that it would not would be to provide information from an expert.
And I think because they didn't bring an expert to the table, you can take their statement as you wish. You don't have to believe it, because it's not a proven expert.
And that's why I'm saying I don't think they met that criteria.
Okay.
For the variance. The other thing I think I'm concerned about is, under the variance, is that in the same section here about the surrounding property values, there's going to be a 5,000 gallon holding tank for the remains of these animals. And
I think it's not. Len, can you
Maybe
describe
it's
it? I know you had
1,000.
quite.
It's for the wastewater
The
that
wastewater.
comes
Wash
from
water also.
washing and
So
any
it
blood.
says that this tank has to be emptied once a week. But somewhere else in the minutes, it says that there would be daily trips to empty the holding tank. And then someone said, well, that would be done by a company, I don't know, septic company or whatever. And then a couple of other places in the minutes, it said that he would actually probably be doing some of this himself. I'm concerned he's not a septic hauler. I'm concerned that there may be some contamination to the groundwater while he's doing this. There may be some ramifications down the road to surrounding wells. That didn't lie well with me. The other thing under the special exception, one of the criteria is that it's an appropriate location for such a use and that it's consistent with the town's master plan. I read the land use chapter that was submitted, and didn't see anything in there that this was consistent with the master plan. This is not, in my view, a home occupation at all. A home occupation has to be carried out within the home itself. You cannot add an addition on and then say that you have a home occupation. This is much more than a home occupation.
He's not asking for it to be considered a home occupation.
And I understand that.
Okay.
But they used that argument as
Into the house.
conforming to the master plan, and I don't think this conforms to the master plan at all.
And just to add on to that, when I asked the question of the attorney at the last meeting, which I asked him master specifically when she said it's consistent with the master plan, I said, I have the master plan right here, and I was flipping through it, I said, which principle are you speaking to? She did not have the answer there. So when I thought you presented tonight that she might have had the answer to which specific principle, I don't think it was pointed out which specific principle, which then still gets to me that I don't think it was really answered, which one of the.
And I don't really think it's in there, that's why.
I don't think it is either. Whether it's good or bad, I don't think that specific, specific
Right.
scenarios in here.
Right. And then under the special exception, number 3, it says the size, in the paperwork that we were submitted, the size of the approved facility and frequency of its use is limited by the conditions opposed will not significantly alter the character of the neighborhood. I don't believe that they can say that as a fact, unless we do have something that says that it will not have a negative impact on the neighborhood. I think that neighborhood is strictly residential and/or conservation use, and and I can understand putting a few animals there as livestock, maybe even a farm, and slaughtering a few animals for their own use, but this, to me, that's not what this is. This is a slaughterhouse.
It's a business.
And a residential area. And I think that's all I have to say right now. That's it.
Glenn?
If I can follow up on a couple of things Joanne said and make a couple of points of my own. One of the things, I just think we have way, way too many unanswered questions in this. The plan is too informal. Let me start by the septic thing that Joanne is talking about. I've done quite a bit of research on this, and the wastewater, gray water that you're talking about from slaughterhouse work is something on the order of 10 or 15 times by one measure of the potency of regular domestic sewage. You've got a lot of suspended organic compounds, other things that take time to decompose that come out in this wash water. And it's much more, again, potency, I guess, is the best word, or it's a lot more potent than anything that you would pump out of your septic tank.
From the materials provided, though, do you consider it hazardous waste, or it's just?
It's not considered hazardous waste, but it's, it's full of bacteria, usually fur, feces, stomach contents, all the things that get washed down when the carcass gets split and it's eviscerated.
Right.
I mean, but to follow on with some other questions, I'm also, one of the things, and I believe it's addressed in the letter from the Finney's attorney, is talking about the adequacy of water on the site. Again, my research that I've done from the internet says it takes something on the order of 600 or 700 gallons of water for the sanitation processes per ton of live kill at this slaughterhouse. I've not heard any indication that Mr. Advocator has had his well tested to find out if you've got that kind of flow from a residential well. That's a hell of a, if you're talking about a ton every couple of days, you're talking about pumping 300, 400, 500 gallons or more a day. And what effects, okay, he puts in another well. What effects does that have on the water table and on the wells of the surrounding abutters? The houses may be in Bedford, but water table doesn't look at municipal boundaries, and, what's this going to do? I don't believe, and, I may be corrected, that any of those houses in Bedford are on any kind of a municipal water supply. I suspect because of the remoteness of that corner, you're talking about well and septic for most of them. I mean, I just, like Joanne, I feel it's a great idea. I've looked at halal slaughter. It's a lot better for the animal than the death factories of armor and stuff. The animal is calm, the animal is slaughtered quickly, but just for the transportation, for the water demands, for the storage of a 5,000 gallon tank. I looked at the handout that Mr. Applicator provided at the last meeting. And you were talking that storage tank is 8.5 feet in diameter and about 12 feet high. You're talking about something that's the size of a small tanker truck. And as Joanne pointed out, you've got to haul just the number of trucks that are going a day that would be coming into this site. If you're talking about, pump your septic every 3 years, if you've got a big truck coming in once weekly to empty 5,000 gallons of high potency sludge, there's room for problems there.
When you did your research, could you identify that, was this tank meant to be an above-ground tank, or was it envisioned as a below-ground tank? So when you did
It looks from the material that you provided, it is an above-ground storage tank, which I'm sure would involve catch basins for whatever wash water runoff and pumped into an above-ground tank.
Yeah, when I looked at the purposes of that tank, and it's the advertisement, what it's for things to hold, for you to take out of. It wasn't necessarily for you things to put into, to store.
Well, I mean, it did say it was a holding tank for floor drains of, and could include hazardous materials.
But it had to be
again, you're talking about storing thousands of gallons of a biologically hazardous stuff on site and, pumping once a week. And as I believe the other abutter, I believe the person who represented the tar sink, where he said the hides, the pelts, how many trips a day are you going to be talking, or weekly are you going to be talking with rendering trucks? The waste, not the waste, but shall we say the inedible portions of the carcasses, according to what I've seen, is something on the order of 50 to 60% of the weight of the animal. So you get, 10 100-pound sheep in a week for slaughter, you've got 400 or 500 pounds of remains that you've got to dispose of somehow. As I say, I just think the slaughterhouse itself is a fine idea. We need it, but this is not the right location for it. If it were in, I believe it's a permitted use in the industrial zone, or by special exception in the industrial zone. If we were talking about the industrial zone with access to municipal sewerage, with access to, municipal water supply, I don't think it'd even be a question, but I mean, I just think it's a bad site.
Down the sewer
But,
lines.
how many truckloads do you think that LeMay gets? I mean, look at all the slaughter he does. Where do you think he does with his bones and sludge?
Well, but you're talking a different case. You're not talking about a remote dirt road. You're talking middle
about
of town with highway access
I
within.
understand that, but I mean, you have to take into consideration too that they're abutting all condo units, they're abutting a church, they're abutting all residential. I mean, you can't.
But I
and,
believe they've been there
They've
since
been there
most
for a
of the
long,
surrounding
long time.
development.
They've been there for 50 years.
Same thing with
For
the,
zoning.
same thing with the pig farm on the
Right,
back
right.
road that was there long before Medford Farms.
And it's probably
a
the
pig-
reason why there's only one USDA-approved slaughterhouse in the whole state of New Hampshire,
It's
right? I mean, you're gonna have a public outcry for it.
Yeah.
People don't want it in their backyard, I understand. So you gotta walk through the requirements and say, does it meet this situation, both for a variance and a special exception, and we're speaking to that,
As I
so.
say, but for all the things that I've outlined, I just think it's an inappropriate site for what's being suggested, unless you're gonna come back with a way more detailed plan, talking about a lot of these things like water, and again, we didn't talk about,
But we'd have to give them a
truck
list.
traffic in and out.
To give them a list of everything that we want itemized. I mean, if that's what you want, a more detailed plan, how many times you?
Yeah,
Well,
I think, so we just have to be careful what's planning board and what's the zoning board.
Right.
But as I said earlier, I think a lot of these things can impact how we determine on the zoning board, because it talks to size. Is it appropriate, is it appropriate use for that property? Which, they make the case because you can do this type of facility in an agricultural zone if it's nothing else on that property, that it's the only principal use and it's allowed by special exception. They're right. It's allowed use with a special exception. But that's not the case that we have in front of us. We have that there's already a principal use on the property. That's why we have to seek the variance. So we're talking to, how does it impact to that house? How does it impact to the abutters? How does it impact, because we gotta look at size and frequency and all those things that are special exception things bleed over into the variance, which talks about, does it impact the, property values of the abutters, is, in the general purpose of the interest, the ordinance and the public interest reach into those same safety and, issues as well as, special exception, so. That's why I think, we don't wanna get too far down in the weeds, but I think whatever it is, the information that helps scope it, so when people come in and they have a drawing that says, here's the size, here's traffic counts, it impacts those special exception type things.
I think whatever decision we make, we better be able to,
Oh, it's gotta be tight,
Well, I think
as they all should be.
in addressing just the variance, and some of the notes I've made is that with respect to item number 3, substantial justice, I believe there already is substantial justice because he's using the property as a residence. And if we were to deny, it's not devaluing that property at all. It's not a hardship on him. I believe for item number 4 on the variance criteria, it is my opinion that I think there would be a diminution of value to surrounding properties. And I think one of the points that Len made was, it's not just value, but with the volume, without commercial water up there, without city water up there, let's say he has to put in a second well. Let's say he finds he doesn't have the flowage. Now, what's that going to do to the surrounding properties? That's a diminution of value. They start having well problems. And 5A in variance, I don't believe he's shown that a hardship exists on that property again, because he's not losing value because he can't put the slaughterhouse there. He's not losing value.
For that specific criteria, or that criteria.
It's 5A.
Yep, 5A. They're talking about, we can relieve ourselves of this hardship by subdividing the property.
We could. And there was some discussion on that, and they said that basically wasn't necessarily an option that they wanted to pursue.
But they left it on the table.
But they left it on the table. Now, with regards to the special exception, in item number 1, as much as the area is zoned agricultural, I think the spirit of what's going on up there as far as the surrounding property is residential. There are really no other businesses up in that area around Joppa Hill Road, and it's not very far away that it is nothing but homes. It is nothing but homes. Under the special exception criteria number 2, I believe it's something that's completely out of the character of the neighborhood. I've driven through there many, many times. In fact, I was through there again today, just to look again to see, All right, how much is this really impacting the neighbors? There's a lot of foliage in there. I mean, granted, there's visual buffers that he'd be working with, but yeah, it's a high spot. I think if one of these tanks, something happens and a leak ruptured, everything goes downhill. Everything goes downhill. And number two, I just think it's completely out of character. It's a great idea. I think it belongs in a commercial or industrial district of the town. But it's just out of character of that neighborhood. As far as criteria 3, the traffic assessment is great as far as number of vehicles, but I've been on that road in the summer, like as it is now, when it's been graded in the spring, and things are nice and flat, but it does narrow. I mean, I have a pickup. It's not a big truck. And there are places where the road is graded wider in a couple of spots just down the road from his driveway, where the telephone pole that hangs the power wire is in the road. And on the other side, it's graded beyond the tree stumps. So the tree trunk and the telephone pole were in the road, causing no more than a vehicle and a half width of available passing space. And I believe that the type of vehicles that would have to service this facility and the frequency of those types of vehicles is a concern on the impact on a Class 5 road, especially in the winter. It's going to rut it, and it's going to rut it something fierce. I've been on that road in the winter. You can't do more than 5-10 miles an hour at the most, sometimes during the winter, especially when they can't push the snow beyond the sides of the road, which, by the way, are cut in most places. There's 6 to 12 inches of soil and gravel up the side before you spill in to the wood line. So that's going to hamper snow removal. It's going to make that road extremely narrow. And when you get those big trucks in there, especially during spring snow melt, I think it's going to be a problem. It's going to become a problem for the residents, especially now with the enlightenment that the trucks are not only going to have to come in from that same, from one side, but they're going to have to go back out. They can't, the road is not going to be allowed to share. Both ends of the roads are not going to share the abuse. It's all going to be on the Goffstown side. So that's going to require the town to possibly have to maintain that road twice as much as they are now because of the size of the equipment that's running in and out of there. And last but not least, on number 4 in the special exceptions, I'm just looking at basic dimensions of the main building, and it's already almost twice of the 1,500 feet that's being represented. That doesn't include the area outside the building, the holding tanks, which are depicted in a drawing a little bit further into the presentation. But anyway, both those holding tanks are outside the building, which, imposes a larger footprint on the facility. The holding pen, the offal pen, and the or room and the hide room is in addition to that 2,200 square feet of just rectangular building. Granted, the processing area is 1,500 feet, but the facility itself is going to be it's going to be better than twice that size. So I just, again, to summarize, I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see it in town, but that's not the place for it. It's just not the place for it.
Yeah, the short of it, I expressed during the public hearing was, I think they're struggling with how big they really want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it started that it was a family operation, that they were providing it, and they were going to provide it to the community, and they have a vision that it can be scaled up to some larger facility, and And they haven't fully comprehended all the steps to get there, all the sizes. Yep, they've addressed the specific things and the tanks and stuff, but it hasn't been one integrated concept to answer the questions of how big is it gonna be? How close is it to the, I have a drawing and it's gonna be this close to the abutters because I know there's concerns and, that speaks to the variance criteria and it speaks to the special exception on impact, safety issues. So I think they're trying to figure out how big it is. And that struggle to me is, how do I approve it? They offer to limit it, but I'm not sure that, 12 requires a 1,500 square foot or 1,500 square feet allows you to do 12 animals at one time. So how many animals are stored, we don't need to know all the details, but I just don't think they're all compatible and all driven together.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
Can an additional motion be made at this point, or do we have to act on the motion that's on the table?
I have something to say too.
Yeah, okay. We can get to that when we
Okay.
make a motion. The, on the drawings that they had, or as they pointed to it, they were talking about, let's make it as close as we can to the existing house and barn or storage area, whichever it's called formally. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, frankly. In my mind, I think it makes it worse because how'd you ever sell a piece of property like that? Now you have a house with this thing that's right out the back door, yeah, okay, you don't have to sell it, but, it just becomes a situation where it's not really two distinct businesses, but everything's merging together and it's just one big amalgam of stuff, a home and the business. It almost becomes a home occupation, just very large home occupation, because it's right there. So when you try to protect the abutters, I'm not sure that made it any better. So what I recommend is, after Kathy's got some comments, is that we can talk about, after Kathy's, we can talk about how we want to handle the motions.
I just wanted to speak to one of the special exceptions, and that is the third criteria, that the use will not create a nuisance or hazard to vehicles or pedestrians in a manner that cannot be ameliorated. If you go to page 4 of the minutes,
We're going to trust you because we all don't have.
Attorney Kevin Regstead asked of Attorney Connell if she thought we would flag that as appropriate because of noise, smell, or runoff that would affect neighbors. And Attorney Connell's response was, we hope that that would be minimal. Noise and smells and runoff are nuisances. And nuisances were affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court, I believe maybe 1926, nearly a century ago, under Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company, 272 U.S. 365 in 1926, where the court says a nuisance may be merely a right thing in a wrong place. And I think that's what we have here. We have a good idea. We believe that there are needs for slaughterhouses. This is the wrong place. And if noise, smell, and runoff would affect the neighbors only minimally, that is a minimal nuisance. And nuisances, whether it be the third criteria of a special exception or in our zoning ordinances under 3.8 nuisances and hazards, It says, "No use may be made of any lot that may become an excessive annoyance or nuisance to other properties by reason of unsightliness or of the excessive emission of odors, dust, fumes, smoke, noise, heat, or glare." Therefore, I do not feel that this application meets the criteria of a special exception for that reason and others, but that reason specifically. This business would be a nuisance under the special exception criteria number 3.
We asked a number of those questions last meeting, you know, how nuisance of a nuisance is it, you know, because there it had even a adjective, or if that's the right word, in front of the nuisance, it said significant or something like that. Was, so you have a neighbor that has kids playing. That's noise, you know, sound to you, right? Is that a nuisance? So so in this case, if they have kids, and I think actually your children playing on their property, neighbors hear them. They said, well, I can hear the children, so if I can hear them slaughter it, that's a nuisance. Well, I don't know. If you can hear animals, day in, day out, animals making their noises, just because you hear them, is that a nuisance? Or is it because you don't like them, it's a nuisance? So I think there's a distinction that you can say, yeah, cars drive by, people play, kids play, I hear it all. To me, it's a nuisance. I don't have children, or is it not? You know, so I think it is that grade scale of what's a nuisance, and we can make that judgment. I think in this case, the applicant has tried to ameliorate those things by, you know, offering in their conditions of approval, buffering with pines or whatever, you know, leaves don't fall off, trees, they're gonna wash things down, they're not gonna put stuff into their septic, so there should be no leaching, and they're gonna try store things in refrigerated containers so that smells and, you know, rodents and bugs don't get into it. So I think they've tried to address that, because they know we talked about it last time, you know, they're trying to address those nuisance factors. Butter still talked about them, you know,
Well,
we still can bring it up. It's just, I'm just gonna say, they did try to address those things.
We did address that nuisance factor with another application that we had last year that dealt with goats next to a residential properties. And there is something to be said about children playing, and there was something to be said about chickens clucking.
Yep.
But there was a lot to be said about goats, and that they don't cluck, and they don't, you know, they might not all be laughing like children, but their noise is significant to that of a baby crying. It's penetrating. And I do believe this board felt that at that particular application, that the noise of goats, happy goats, needless to say, there could be a distinction between the noise, minimal noise, of a goat being slaughtered would be considered to be a nuisance noise, as we had so voted before.
And they did address that, you know, that this process would be where they would be a calming effect, and they wouldn't make that noise in a normal slaughter. So she made that point again this evening. So
I think it's important to point out that statement in the ordinance twice emphasizes the word excessive annoyance or nuisance, and excessive emission of odors, dust, fumes, smoke, noise, heat, unsightliness. So you want to make sure that if you're going to vote based on this point of the ordinance, that you feel that it is excessive.
yeah, I agree. Okay. Well, unless there's other comments, we have Kathy's motion is on the table to disagree, to deny based on the criteria that she specified. It hasn't been officially seconded yet. If if it doesn't get a second, it basically dies.
I thought Joanne seconded it. Did she withdraw? I said I tabled it.
Thought I seconded it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so there's a second with, because if we don't use that, we can still make another motion, you know what I'm saying? So,
I'll withdraw my second.
Yes, I told you I tabled the motion.
okay,
That's what I did. I tabled the motion.
so there's no,
Until, to see if another motion would come forward.
okay, okay. So, after this discussion, are there any motions that anybody would like to make?
I will make a motion that we deny both the variance and the special exception based on, I don't feel he's made the argument for under variance for item number 3, substantial justice. I believe it's already provided as the property is of value as a residence, and this would not be a hardship should we deny that. And on number 4, in the variance criteria, that I believe there would be a diminution of value to surrounding properties, as stated by the one woman that came in with the information that there was, she had seek professional advice on that, and then that there would be a diminution of value. And also that, we are not, there is no diminution of value to the owner of the property in the event that we deny, because he still has it as a residential property. And under the special exception criteria,
So can you identify that last one again? So was
That would be
reference to
5A.
5A, hardship?
yeah,
So in that one, let me
there
just
is no
walk you.
hardship created to the owner because it doesn't devalue his property any by denying this.
Can you make a statement walking into 5 before you get to 5A and to say that, that there, well, part of it is special conditions of the property? Do you believe there are special conditions of this property that make it unique from distinguish it from other properties in the area? I just want to make sure we're clear on this, on the hardship. And I don't need to force you on it, but it's, if we wanted to be clear, we could say, this property is like all the others around it. There's
Well,
no,
it is in the fact that, it's residential in, it's agricultural in zoning, but in nature, it's residential, as is all the other properties around it. There are no other agricultural uses adjacent to him at this point. And especially with agricultural, with respect to operations of a slaughterhouse.
and we're not going to all of them. We only got 3 of them here on the variance.
As far as special exception, I'm sorry, that was under variance under 5A. In the special exceptions, again, I think in item number 1, although it is zoned agricultural, the principal use of the property existing and the surrounding properties existing are residential.
So which item under special exception are you speaking to?
This would be number 1, I believe.
That's the master plan?
Yeah, on the master plan, where I believe the spirit of the master plan is this, if this area should be developed, it be developed as residential.
So the term that's used in the ordinance is consistent with the town's current master plan. So are you saying?
Correct.
It is not consistent?
I believe that this is not consistent with the spirit of the town's master plan, and that this area be developed as residential and not commercial in nature, which is what basically this is happening with the slaughterhouse.
So, just to be clear, normally, we can, and I recommend that we do speak to the special exception criteria. But you wouldn't technically get to it unless you approve the variance to allow the 2 principal uses. But we'll add on, because otherwise we'll send them back and forth and.
Do the special exception first.
No, special exception is only allowed if we allow them to do multiple principal uses on this property.
Okay.
So even though you're requesting
I'm doing this because I addressed
denying.
denying both, yeah.
Okay. So just think about it, though, that if we were to allow it, if it were to be allowed in that property, that it would be not consistent to allow the slaughterhouse, because this mixed use, a slaughterhouse on this piece of property in this area is not consistent with the town's master plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And as far as being in character with the neighborhood, it's, again, it's a slaughterhouse, and it is not in character with the rest of the neighborhood, which is all residential, including the conservation land, which, to take it to the other extreme, the conservation land is there per the wishes of the owner to protect animals from being used like this.
Let me clarify, so I'm nitpicking.
Yep, I understand.
So, because we're looking at special exception, and the attorney is correct in that a special exception is how do I make this fit right, whether it's size or frequencies of use, because I'm assuming the use is authorized are allowed in this zoning ordinance.
Right.
So,
and in the special exception, in 2, it also addresses, I believe, the character.
it actually says size or frequency
Okay.
of the use. So
Of the use.
it's saying it's okay to have it in this area, but you have to distinguish because it's too big, too small, it's done too often. So you have to speak to more size and frequency of what this activity is, because you're assuming the use is allowed. So you have to talk about why that use in this environment is not right. I'm just walking through it because it's gotta be good.
Yeah, I think that the frequency of the use that he is intending to use it for is out of character and not consistent with the rest of the neighborhood, which is purely residential. Purely residential.
Period.
Number 3, I disagree with the traffic assessment, not necessarily with the frequency of vehicle traffic, but I believe it's the type of vehicular traffic that's going to be on that Class 5 road, which is really not designed to take the heavy truck traffic in the frequency that they are proposing. I think it's going to do a lot of damage to the road, and I think it's going to cause the town to have to spend more time and money maintaining it.
Is that a Class 5 road or Class 6?
It's Class 5 road up there. Class 6 would be non-maintained. Class 5 is gravel road, but it's maintained. They do provide plowing in the winter, as best they can do it, based on the construction of the road that's there.
So as Brian was talking about this specific one here, so it's the nuisance or hazard, so.
Right.
So do you believe?
I believe that the vehicular traffic that would be required to service this facility is going to create hazards in the road because of the damage that these vehicles will do to the road.
Is that,
And that damage will affect other vehicles, those being the property owners and other residents on that road that use that road to get to and from their homes.
And it's not in a manner that can be ameliorated? That they can't somehow change the size of the vehicles or the day?
Well, what you're doing by changing the size of the vehicle, who are you talking about? The applicant changing the size of the vehicle? Well, the type of service vehicles are going to be required to haul 5,000 and 6,000 gallons of gray water, the tonnage of byproducts from the facility. You're not going to be able to do this in pickup trucks. They're going to have to be vehicles that are going to displace gravel when water's flowing across it and things like that, rut the road, and also in places they're going to block the road from 2-vehicle passage because the road's just not gonna be wide enough to handle these trucks and other vehicular traffic from the local residents that are gonna be passing on this road at the same time. And finally, and under special exception on number 4, I just don't believe that they have given us enough information as far as the scope of the operation. They have consistently, talked about 1,500 square foot processing facility, but that's not the entire facility. That's maybe just the processing area, but there's office space, there's the tanks that are gonna be exterior of the facility. The rooms containing the hides and the offal and all that were exterior of that square footage. And we're, just on the few measurements and a little bit of math that I did based on the drawing that they said was conceptual, they're looking at almost 3 times that space. So I just don't think enough information has been provided from the applicant to satisfy items number 4 in the special exception.
Okay. Any comments? Any seconds?
Am I still a voting member on this one? Kevin?
Yes, Len, you are the voting
I
member.
will second his motion.
Any discussion on the specific motion? Do you want me to go over which things you had, or everybody abundantly clear what he made as a motion? Clear?
Mhm.
Comment?
Mm-mm.
Clear? Okay, so the motion that, first by Ed, a second by Len, to deny both the variance and the special exception. There's 3 criteria that they did not meet in the variance, 4 criteria they did not meet in the special exception, which will be in the notice, if so approved. Any last questions? All those in favor of denying the variance and the special exception, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Ed, for making the motion. Those are always tough to get through. Okay, we got time to do one more? Okay, so we're gonna see if we can get through quickly, and if we can't, we'll talk about it. On the reviewing and deliberating on the Cumberland Farm. Any comments, motions, discussion?
I have an observation. I heard from the applicant's attorney that they had a meeting with the abutters, and he made some representation that the abutters were okay with what they were doing, and then the abutters all got up and said they were not okay. So obviously there's some lack of communication there. I'm like a visual person, so I tried to picture that building, kept looking at the old footprint versus the new, and it is really, really large. And I think it's a very nice-looking building as compared to what's there on the site. But I think it's just too much for that site. I'm wondering what it would look like in the end. And I don't know what the square footage is for the Irving station, because it looked like a similar type of architecture. But again, the Irving site is much larger. The one on the corner of Henry Bridge and Mast Road, it's a much larger site. So even if the building were about the same size, it still wouldn't give you, a good, accurate picture. I would like to table this and have them come back with additional information as to what they can do to minimize the size of that building before we take a final vote on it.
Would they be willing to do that?
Close the public hearing.
Oh, we can reopen it.
I would like to say something, if possible.
Sure.
I don't think that the committee, or any committee, understands the reasoning for proposing a building of such a enormous, well, I would say enormous, of such size. The reason, and I've been dealing with people that have, what do you call it? Several buildings. Chains. And their reason for putting a building up, and maybe I'm wrong, is
Maybe
that.
kind of interrupt, I know we're getting to the high point, but I'm gonna, at this point, designate who the voting members are on this.
Oh, I don't know.
So, just so that I don't pick it at the end of deliberation, you know, like, oh, yeah, I want your vote, all
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Vivian to vote on this one, is that okay? Share the wealth? Okay, is that okay, everybody? Vivian votes.
And the fact that the building itself has a village look. And, you know, everybody says a village look, and it does. And I agree with Mrs. Bovier, and she said the Main Street program, which we had a committee for Main Street, and they are pretty set on their ways, on what they want for the village. And when you see someone come up from the Main Street and say, you know what, we approve this because it's the ambiance is nice, it's a beautiful building, they've done everything they could, they're also taking suggestions, they're doing what the Main Street program asked, or the Main Street Committee asked them, and they're making a small, I think what they've done is, if you look at your building, the whole building there, that is a piecemeal. And it's such a building, it's over 40 years old, maybe 50 years old. It's a building that has to be torn down, no matter what. And you say, yeah, we'll put up a smaller building. Realize that this, to me, when I see this gentleman talking, they propose a 3,200 square foot or whatever. That's what they need to survive. That's what's needed. And if you go to any other chain, be it a drugstore, be it a supermarket, be it what they need to survive is that footage, and that's how they have to build it. If they go smaller, who knows? They may survive, but it won't be as economic as they want it to be. And when they propose that size building, now maybe I could be wrong, but I would if she wants to table it, that would be my question to them. And I don't think we have I don't think we have a problem here. I think they've done everything. When I see what they're doing, the presentation, I think, was great. And I think for like I said, the Main Street to say, hey, you know what? This is great. We like this. It's got a good look to it. But basically, that's, and there are three parking spaces off. I mean, come on. Are we gonna argue for 3 parking spaces when we've gone to other entities where they've off by 50 parking spaces and we've given them the right to build?
And that's not in front of our board.
Right, but it's not out, but I mean, you know, that's something that.
Well,
So big
a
deal.
little thing that bothers me about what you said, Vivian, is that, as this gentleman stated, they've owned this since 2003. This is 2011, and I would probably suggest to you that if it wasn't profitable, they wouldn't have been there for 8 years. I don't think that their profitability or increased profitability on that property supersedes the neighbors' 50-foot setbacks, or I just don't think that this is the best plan. This is a plan that worked out the compromises of the neighbors. I think that Joanne's statement about the fact that we heard one thing from the attorney, which almost was totally contradicted by all the neighbors as to what was actually said at that neighborhood meeting, is very concerning. Personally, I mean, they have survived I don't think this is the best plan we can get from them. I do agree with Joanne. Come back and show us something. Take 8.5, 9 feet off of the side next to the abutter on the east side. Move it a little bit more forward from the back of the property. The existing plan was even closer. And traffic still managed to get in and out of there and go to the gas pumps. They still managed to have pretty adequate parking for the size of the building. I don't think the neighbors who came out here, all of them came out here. All of the neighbors came out here and said this didn't work for them. Parts of it did, but I didn't see anything coming from the Cumberland side that compromised with the neighbors what their concerns were. And for them to put it down, for them to say, yes, we invited the neighbors to have a meeting so we could, that's fine, but I didn't see anything come away from that. And I'm very concerned. I would certainly encourage Cumberland Farms to put a nicer looking facility in there. But 12 feet from the back, 12 feet from the abutter's property that goes straight down and has huge drainage issues, now has drainage issues. Now they're going to move it back and cause additional drainage issues to me down the back. And the woman over on the east side, they're talking about cutting down the trees. That to me, it's just too big for the property as it is now. But the idea is good, and I just, if I had to vote now, I would have to vote to deny it, but I would rather table it and see if they come back with something that would be even more acceptable to this town.
Years ago, commercial entities was 10 feet from residential. Years ago, that's what it was. Okay, it's been changed. I know because I was commercial abutting. People that moved in hit there while the gas station was there, knew the gas station was there, knew the convenience store was there, and yet they still chose to move in there. So and then another thing, nobody's even brought up, or you haven't brought up, or Joanne, they have decreased their pumps. They have decreased their canopy. Oh, everybody's arguing about the big building they're building, but don't you take into consideration the decreased part of it? and they're trying to accommodate I'm sure they'll work with the neighbors. If they want business, they're gonna be a good neighbor.
I don't see the hardship. I really don't see the hardship to allow them. I mean, there's the setback in the back is 38 feet. A difference between 50-foot setback and 12 feet, I think, is 38 feet.
We've done worse than that.
But, but we're in they're surrounded by residents, and there was a reason why they increased that 10-foot setback to 50 feet. And it was because of the neighbors. It was because of residential's next to them. So,
you know, I was
But
worried
now,
about the
but now we're in a situation where we've got a piece of property that's unique. And
we're always worried about our taxes, and now we're increasing the size of the building to help our taxes.
in order to make this
They don't wanna do
work,
it.
I mean, we're gonna have to grant variances. As far as the size of the building is concerned, yeah, it's gonna be a big footprint. And maybe Cumberland Farms needs to go back and say, okay, we've got an odd lot. This may be the smallest footprint we have to date that we're using for our stores, maybe because this is a special situation and a special lot that we have acquired, maybe we need to modify that footprint for this particular building and see what we can do to ameliorate the situation as far as the neighbors are concerned and the sizes of the building. I think, and I believe we have the right to suggest to planning that the existing tree buffer not be touched on the east side, because I think it's important. Let's face it, nobody wants to look at retaining walls and fences. It's a nice idea, but I would rather see a line of trees and no building than concrete and wood that rots and decays and and that people write graffiti on and stuff like that. I have yet to see anybody write graffiti on trees, but they will do it on a fence and a concrete wall. And around the back, there are ways that they can ameliorate trash being blown off their property or pushed off their property with snowplows. I think these are all workable problems. I had, do we know when the house directly behind the Hague's house was built? Was it
No.
built after the store, after the gas station came in? I'm pretty sure it was. So they knew they were building up behind a gas station. And the, Miss Golding on the left-hand side knew she was buying a piece of property next to a gas station.
Yeah, she admitted, yeah.
So they have, some of this responsibility they have to accept themselves. And whereas this new building is gonna be set back, the building's actually gonna be farther away from her home than the existing one is now.
That's not true.
It's pretty close based on the measurements that I'm looking
No,
at.
the pink is
Property line, no.
The pink is not the existing.
No, the pink is not the building. This is the building
Right.
here. This is just the buildable space if they meet all the setback requirements. I understand what the drawing is. I'm looking at the corner of this building to her house and the corner of this building to her house. The building's actually, I bet if you go out and measure it, it's further away. It is not further away from her property line, which is what we're dealing with today. And, you know, if they can modify the size of the building a little bit to give her some more room, then fine. You know, they'd have to modify it by about 9 feet, 8.5 feet, 9 feet. And then leave the trees, you know, and still put in the fence as a sound buffer would be even better. Put it, you know, between the property line and the tree line, or just inside the tree line on their side of the property would be even better if they could do something like that. But that building that is there is an eyesore. It's got to come down. And the best thing to do is to get everybody to work together on this. I like the conceptual design. I think it fits, and the important thing is that, unlike what happened with the town and the Shell station, this time we make sure that it's built to conceptual drawing and not thrown up and see you later, and we get stuck with what Shell looks like. And that wasn't the building that was supposed to go in there, based on the conceptual drawings back then. So I think it's you know, it's gonna be up to enforcement to make sure that that gets done. But
So in,
I would like to see something like this. I think it's great, and I think working with Main Street, I think a light buffer could be put in using that wall and combination of trees or whatever, or just bring all fueling traffic in from the front so that the headlights are pointed at the store. That can be done too. And snow removal, yeah, they're gonna have to keep on top of that. They're gonna have to have a service that, once it backs up, they've gotta haul it off-site.
Pumps
think
are
he said that.
changing from,
The pumps are changing direction so that instead of, you know, the headlights going left and right, they're gonna be either at the store or at Mast Road. But if you bring all the traffic in that's coming into fuel so that they have to point at the store, I mean, you can put arrows on the pavement to direct that. Or if it, you know, a vehicle does come in pointed north, that this wall that they're proposing and whatever foliage they put on the store side of that wall blocks the headlights. You know, let's face it, it's gonna bother people for 4 months of the year.
Most gas stations have now that you have to follow the arrows.
Most gas stations do have stuff, have things like that. So,
A
I mean,
lot of
all this can be ameliorated, but, yeah, I think maybe it's a good idea that we table it and give them a chance to come back and say, you know, okay, yeah, we're willing to work with this a little bit. Or, I mean, if they come back and say, no, this is drop dead, take it or leave it, well, now we've got other issues to deal with.
so a lot of this is planning board stuff.
A lot of it is planning
Most of
board.
it is
The
planning board.
majority of it's planning board.
So, Because it's
Absolutely.
their job to deal with the specifics inside the bounds that we define.
Right.
And the bounds that we define is what they come here to variance for.
Right.
Is it to be within, they have to be outside the 50-foot setback, or can they encroach on that
Right.
50-foot setback? And that's really all we control, really.
And I think
So-
that,
Hang on, so
Go
that's
ahead.
really all we control. We know the impacts
Is
of
the
that.
bounds,
We'll,
yeah.
we'll know all this backstory, so when we make our decision, is it, again, the reason for the 50-foot, and why I asked them is, why is there a 50-foot buffer? Well, it's so that we don't negatively impact the residential neighbors. Okay, so I think it would be smart, based on the knowledge that we have, that they provided of what they envision as this gas station that exists, but they're gonna modify it, the number of vehicles, the number of parking spaces, the lighting, what services are provided. Are those activities a negative impact to the residents, that if we were to encroach on the 50-foot on the east by 9 feet, if we're to encroach 35 feet or 38 feet into the rear, is it negative? If we encroach 33 feet to the west, which is a road, and if we encroach like that, is it okay? And then we do that by looking at what does the variance speak. So most of that is really covered in the spirit of the ordinance. Spirit of the ordinance, it was just the first and the second criteria, talks about, in the zoning ordinance, pages 1 and 2, what I think really apply. Purpose of the ordinance, 1.3.1, to protect and promote the public safety, convenience, comfort, aesthetics, prosperity, health, and general welfare of the inhabitants. Could talk to secure safety from fires, panic, explosion, noxious fumes, and other hazards and dangers. To promote adequate light, air, privacy, and convenience of access to property. To conserve property values by preventing the harmful encroachment of incompatible uses, which is a specific criteria itself, number 4. So those are the things that, when we start looking at the variance criteria, is this plan as submitted by encroaching into these 50-foot setbacks negatively impacting these purposes of the zoning ordinance? Public safety, harmful encroachment affecting property values, affecting privacy, fumes. Is it doing that? Because when you look at the hardship stuff, yeah, they already have a gas station there.
Yeah.
You start saying you can't do it, but you already have one there, so.
yeah.
That's how I would boil it down, that it's a variance. This is what they've come in for. It's really the encroachment. By them encroaching into these setbacks, is there negative consequences? That is, that's to
Even
the-
more
to their
negative than
advantage.
what's already there.
Yeah, whose advantage is it? There's gonna be a negative consequence, but is it substantial justice for the owner of the land versus the public next door? Who wins? Is there a loser here? Is it too much of an outbalance?
It's always been there, so.
I think the abutters, excuse me, I think the abutters would be impacted more by this proposal. Although I like the proposal, I would like to see less of an impact on the abutters.
So you think the impact is, when you start weighing the substantial justice scale, there is too far a negative consequence to the butters in the town versus the, the loss by this person and the applicant?
Well, what would be the too far consequences? What would be the too far consequences? I mean, are we talking about something that the planning board could remedy, or are we talking something that we have to do?
No, I think it has to do with the setbacks. I think, like I said before, I would like to see further information from them on a different concept for the building itself. I like the way it's set back, maybe not so much, but I like how it's further back. I like the smaller canopy, I like the sign, I like the design of the building. I just think that on those side pieces right there, it's going, and I don't even care about the piece that goes out towards the street. It's the piece that goes towards this abutter and the one in the back.
So for,
Can
oh,
I-
And
Brian, go
people
ahead.
across the street and
Yeah.
the clerks, I'm concerned about them with the lights going in there.
Well, and that's another issue, the placement of the pumps and what they can do to alleviate those lights shining into those windows. And I would like to see that. I know they can do it.
I'd like to maybe just make a comment. Being the planner as well, I spoke to them when they originally came in and reviewed their plan, and they actually originally had the building further closer to the street a little bit, about that maybe 7 or 8 feet. I can't remember the exact amount. They had it closer to the street. But what happened with the design of it was their driveway widths were not sufficient per our ordinance. And so I made the recommendation to them to make the driveways according to what the requirement is, because they're asking for a variance anyway. I mean, they're severely outside the setback, so what's a couple extra feet? If you can make the driveway safer, and according to our ordinance, what it's supposed to be, that extra feet in the rear of the building is not gonna make any difference. And if you're gonna tell them to go back and redesign their building, they're not gonna be able to find that extra room here unless maybe they take it out of this landscape island, which, you know, they could do that, but then they wouldn't be able to landscape it. It would be an island that stops, and then there's a wall, and you'd basically end up with what you have right now. You'd probably have to just do pavement right
Are
there.
you talking
along
the
there.
side entrance off of Mountain Road?
No, I'm talking in the front, along
front?
South Mass Road. You would not have enough room for your driveway there unless you cut down that landscape island that's
Yeah.
right in the front. And so,
Which can be used if the planning board so desires for screening to block the lights.
that's
But
correct.
that's taking into consideration that the building would remain the same size and just be pushed forward. I'm talking about re-looking at the design and the size of the building to lessen the impact on that site with such a large building.
It's still not gonna remedy what the neighbors are concerned about.
I think it
And-
would on the side and on the back if you just cut it down a little bit.
I'd also like to point out that in my discussions with them, and also with Megan, we looked at the side of the building next to Mountain Road. That slopes off significantly on that side. And so to try to push the building towards the road more and away from this house, Teresa Golding's house, was gonna be more and more difficult as you get further up, down that slope.
Well, they could put a
Because you have
retaining
to
wall and fill
help-
and then build over
But
closer.
then you have to do all that extra work to fill it, and, and that's, significant slope stabilization that you're
But
having
if the
to do
building
there.
was smaller, if it was not as wide, if it was just, we're talking 8 feet, or just,
Or, it's not
You know?
that large of a retaining wall that would be needed, as far as the length goes. I mean, look at the retaining walls they're building all over. Look at the retaining wall Target built in Bedford. It can be done, I know it can be done.
So this is what I recommend based on that. We either have two choices. I don't think we can table it. I think I just don't think we have that option, really. I think if you were to make a motion to deny it because you don't like the building size, it encroaches too far into the setbacks, it affects the neighbors, that substantial justice thing, all that, it's property values, whatever criteria you want to use, but it's too far, too much, then it makes them come back with a different plan, right? To say, well, okay, it's significantly different, here's something smaller, or they can do it that way. The alternative is, we trust the planning board. We say, based on, let me hear out. So you say, I think that the neighbors, that this,
That's not
it's
their-
workable, right?
that's not their-
With their, but the planning board, I think, can make it work. I think if we, for the maximum boundaries, that this is as close as they can get for this building, but I trust the planning board in the public process into the planning and the sizing and the location of the building and moving it up and back will come to a amenable solution. Okay, that's the ideal world,
I
right?
think the planning board has a choice to change the pumps if they want to. I mean, they can
Right.
do whatever they want.
That's not
Therefore,
us.
I'll
We're not
make a
being
motion-
asked for
I'll
that.
make a motion to approve.
Second.
You're not voting on this one, Sarah, man.
Never mind.
I'll
I've
second.
been up very early this
It's too
morning, Kevin.
late.
I'll second.
And I trust in the planning board. I think they'll listen to the neighbors and they'll do everything to accommodate them. We can't. We just, like you said, we're voting on the variance.
But once you grant the
You know,
variance,
If I sat here and I heard more than one person say who was a neighbor, if they were in favor of this, then I would think about approving it. But there wasn't one neighbor that liked this at all. And our zoning ordinances are here to protect, and they are voted on by the residents of this town.
But we don't have anything to do with the ambiance,
Oh.
what the neighbors want to,
But it has to do
for
with the
screening and all that.
variance.
It has to do with the variance.
To
and
allow
I-
that building outside of the normal
I go with the Main
setbacks.
Street program. If the Main Street Committee was concerned, that you can be darn sure they would be here, bells on their heels, and say, you know what, we don't want this. However, they came in a whole different attitude.
Yeah, I think by denying it, we could say that we think it's encroaching too much. I mean, we can do that, and it's one of those two options we have. In the motion, are you approving both variances, both for the variances to encroach the setbacks and the variant to approve the sign as proposed?
Yes.
Yes, illumination sign. Is your second
Oh,
speaking
I'll
to both
follow.
variances? Any further discussion? Len, you're not voting on this? I think you're good.
Thank you for your reminder, Kevin. It's been a long day.
Trying to think how I'm gonna vote, so, before I call it out.
Well, just remember that if you do deny it, I'm sure they're gonna be back in with a plan that we'll approve. I don't think just because this is the first one they put on the table, that we have to automatically say it's the best one we're gonna see.
Do we think, I guess I'm most concerned about the, Mrs. Golding's setback, although it's 41 feet to the
41 feet. Yeah,
building.
she thought it was 17.
Yeah.
Right, which is totally different than I think, and it's the removal of the trees, though, which I'm not a huge fan of, and they're creating a larger pavement area or in the retaining wall. I don't know if I'm thrilled about that. It is, you look at that, it's right up to the property line. And unfortunately, she is only 3 to 7 feet from that property line as well.
But again, as Kevin, as Ed pointed out, the building as proposed is probably further from her residence than the existing building.
Yeah.
By
But
pushing,
The
by
planning
pushing
board
it
has a lot
back.
to say about the trees.
There's
The planning-
large trees
The
there
planning
now.
board's gonna have a lot to say about the trees.
Well, let me go back to, so I just was thinking about it as we talked about it, is that they are not proposing any variance for that retaining wall. So if we could deny or change or whatever the distance is to the building, they still take the trees down and they still put the retaining wall up, because there is, what they've come to us from.
Condition it.
Okay, we could, but we're reaching into the planning board's roles, I
If you
think.
feel that it's
So-
going to protect the neighbor, you're not.
Although I believe didn't their council say that they were willing and amenable to work with the planning department on that, and certainly any natural screening that you can get, is going to be less expense to them in the long run.
If they leave the trees.
The fact that,
They're right, 'cause
the
it's your neighborhood.
the zoning,
We're
and
here
planning
for
director
neighbors.
here worked with these people. I mean, he didn't, he
didn't
was
work
taken
with
into
the people.
consideration, and they came up with the plan,
Oh, well.
he came up with
Come on,
the
let's vote.
suggestions, and You have to give that into consideration too. If he didn't think it was going to be, if he thought it was gonna be a big issue, I think he would have tell him to come back with something else. I don't know.
Okay, there's
Anyway.
a first and a second to approve both variances by Vivian and Ed. All those in favor to approve the variances, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No? No.
No abstentions.
Motion
So-
to adjourn.
There's a Town and Country magazine. I think on the Town and Countries, I'm going to look at them, and if there's anything of interest, I'm gonna send them out to the board. Is that okay? You had a motion or a second to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, could you just clarify the vote?
Yes. So it was a 3-2 vote to approve.
Thank you for your time.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for sticking it out.
Yep.